Survival myths that would actually get you killed. You and your best bro are sitting on the couch watching TV, bored out of your mind. You're flipping through the channels when you see somebody you recognize. It's the British guy who goes outside and drinks his own pee for fun. After watching him squeeze elephant poop into his mouth to drink water, you decide to go outside and test your survival capabilities, and also test how real common survival knowledge really is in practice. Because let's be real, whether you're an outdoorsy person or not, we've all heard survival tips at some point in our life. Are these tips that we've always just accepted as truth actually life-saving? Or could they potentially get you killed? And with you and your friends being inspired, you both pack your bags and head out the door for the adventure of a lifetime, not knowing whether or not this would be your last adventure. You were just dropped in an extremely remote location by a helicopter. And as you watch the helicopter fly off, you and your friend are now completely alone, left to your own devices, and your sole goal is to survive and make it home using only the knowledge that you've heard in passing. Before you and your friend can even take your first steps, you need to first understand what direction should you go. And before you could even think, your friend says, "Why don't we go north?" And while you agree, you have a question. How do we know which way is north? But luckily, everybody knows if you want to know which direction is north, all you have to do is find a tree with moss on it, because moss will only grow on the north side of the tree. So you and your friend begin walking until you notice a tree that has moss growing on the bottom of it. And as you approach the tree, that you can see that the moss is in your direction, meaning that if you just do a 180 and start turning around, you'll be going north. Although, just to be sure, you take a quick look around the tree and realize that there isn't only moss on the north side, there's moss on the north, south, east, and west side. This tree trunk is completely covered in moss, and it's not the only one. All of these tree trunks have moss all over them, meaning that you have no idea which way is north, and also debunking this myth that moss is somehow a compass. But this myth isn't just straight out of a fairy tale. There is some basis of reality here, although it's just not fully accurate or reliable at all. According to Michigan State University, it is more likely for moss to grow more prominently on the north side of trees and rocks, although moss can grow basically anywhere, meaning that if you are using moss to navigate, you are setting yourself up for failure, and in a survival situation, setting yourself up for your own possible demise. And while I like organic stuff as much as the next person, I'm gonna stick to my GPS, or at least my compass, when it comes to navigation. Feeling slightly foolish and a bit betrayed, you and your friend decide to confirm which direction is north with your compass and begin moving. So far, this walk is pleasant, and the forest that you guys are in is beautiful and lush, and the steps begin to fly by, and you and your friend are almost lost in conversation when your friend realizes something utterly terrifying. Because the vegetation on the ground is so lush, it's almost impossible to see what's lurking around your feet. And while your friend wasn't looking down, a venomous snake was able to slither onto his boot, up his pant leg, and wrap around your friend's thigh. But the snake didn't just end there. This snake, straight out of Data University, decided to bite your friend directly on the crotch. And by the time you even noticed the snake wrapped around your friend's leg, it was too late, and your friend was screaming in agony. Fortunately, you were able to quickly grab the snake and throw it off into the wilderness. But now you are left with a massive problem. Your friend has just been bitten by a venomous snake. But fortunately, he has a survival tip. It's common knowledge that when somebody receives a venomous snake bite, the best thing to do is immediately suck out the venom, right? It's only logical. The entry wound is still fresh. If you can pull the toxins directly out of the wound, you're only dealing with a small cut and not any venom being directly injected into your bloodstream. It's perfectly logical. And although the placement may be a bit unfortunate, you'd be willing to help your friend out if it was life or death. But in reality, this practice wouldn't be helpful at all. And here's how. Like I mentioned, it may seem initially logical that you would want to remove the venom by any means possible. And some people have even suggested that you should cut the injection site of the fang to make it bigger to be able to suck out more venom. But the reality is this. Once a snake has bitten its victim, there is no way for you to suck out any meaningful amount of venom. And if you were to cut the bite location, you would only be making the wound bigger, causing a higher chance of infection. Speaking of infection, putting your bacteria-ridden mouth on your friend's fresh wound is only going to increase the chances of introducing bacteria directly into your friend's fresh wound. And while it is possible to suck out a small amount of venom, it is not going to be a large enough amount to save your friend's life. However, it could be a large enough amount to cause yourself serious bodily harm or potentially even death as well. So yeah, even though your friend was extremely keen on you removing the venom out of his wound the good old-fashioned way, you luckily both had access to Google just for this brief amount of time, and you were able to confirm that this practice was outdated and potentially deadly and fatal to both of you. And the best course of action would be to limit your friend's mobility. This way, the venom would travel through your friend's body as slowly as possible, giving you the maximum amount of time to get antidote before things got fatal. However, due to plot armor, you had antidote on you and you were able to heal your friend without doing doing any sort of mouth-to-wound suction. After you administer the antidote and you allow your friend to bandage himself up, you both continue on your trek through the woods, feeling better and grateful to be alive, but also feeling more betrayed, because so far, everything you thought you knew was wrong. But before you and your friend could continue to complain about how crazy that entire ordeal was, you run into a much bigger problem. A 750-pound problem that's looking you right in the face. This problem is an adult, aggressive black bear. Your first instinct is to run the opposite way, but before you can even turn, your friend whips his arm around and clenches your arm tightly, holding you in your place. You look your friend in the eye and he tells you, "Are you crazy, man? We can't run away. We have to act like we're already dead." And with your friend's iron grip being on your arm, you have no other option but to lay down beside him. And now the both of you are laying on the ground with a 750-pound black bear slowly approaching your position. You and your friend at this point may be feeling like you just saved your lives. You outsmarted the black bear, and in a few minutes you'll be back well on your way. But in reality, you just made the black bear's life a lot easier and served him up 2 meals on a silver platter. I think most of us at some point have heard, if you see a bear, just play dead. But I think at this point, hopefully most people know that there is definitely some nuance to that. Specifically, that advice does not apply to all bears. Black bears, for example, do not take well to people playing dead. And this is exactly why the bear is currently shaking your friend in his mouth like a dog that just got a new chew toy. Black bears are notoriously aggressive, and if you encounter one, your best course of action is 1, slowly retreat if it doesn't notice you, but if it is fixated on you, your best next steps are to get as big and aggressive as possible. Obviously, you can't fight this bear, but you want to make this bear believe that it's not even worth fighting you. You want to extend your arms and legs outward, look big as possible, yell, sound aggressive, do anything to intimidate this bear, and if you're convincing enough, you may even scare the bear in this process. Grizzly bears, on the other hand, are a bit different. Experts say that grizzly bears respond better if you actually do lay down on the ground, although it's best if you protect your neck just in case and remain still until the bear checks you out and hopefully leaves you alone. And if you happen to end up in a situation where you're face to face with a polar bear, your best bet is to pray. Because polar bears are like black bears, but worse. They are the most aggressive and the most likely to tear your head off. So yeah, although the advice of playing dead around a bear isn't fully inaccurate, it, once again, definitely requires some additional context. The current popular saying is, if it's brown, lay down, if it's black, fight back, and if it's white, good night. Not because you're supposed to play dead, but because you're going to be dead. As you continue to lay motionless on the ground, you peek open one of your eyes to see what's going on. You notice that the black bear has dropped your friend and was distracted by something else, and luckily left you both alone. Your friend, while a little bit worse for wear, is still alive, and you help get him back on his feet, and you once again continue your journey. Feeling a bit bad for your friend, because at this point it looks like he survived 3 rounds with Mike Tyson, 4 days with Diddy, and 5 nights at Freddy's, you decide you would let him take a quick breather and go around gathering some food. Your friend sits down on a rock under a tree, and you decide to go and see what you can find. And once you begin wandering around looking, you realize one crucial thing. You have no idea what's edible or not, and you don't even know what's around you, but that doesn't stop you from looking. And quickly you find yourself approaching some interesting red mushrooms. Now, you know mushrooms can definitely be questionable, but the fact that you see a little snail munching away at these gives you hope. And as you pick these mushrooms, you notice that there's actually small bite marks from chipmunks. This gives you all the confidence you need to pick a few mushrooms and put them in your pocket and to continue scavenging. You continue looking around when you notice a small bush with inconspicuous red berries. You've never seen these berries before, but it doesn't mean that you can't eat them. And while you're cautious of these mysterious red berries, you notice a small bird fly down into this bush and carefully eat these berries before flying away. And once again, you rationalize with yourself, well, if this animal can eat this, obviously I can. If something was poisonous to them, they wouldn't eat it. So you go ahead and collect some of these berries as well. And you notice that you've been scavenging for hours, so you decide to return to your friend and show him your loot. Your friend doesn't seem too enthused by the small handful of random mushrooms and red berries, but something is better than nothing. And you and your friend begin to munch on the world's weirdest trail mix. Feeling energized from the food and also feeling energized mentally that you finally had some knowledge that was true, you and your friend both have a bit more of a pep in your step because you knew that you had at least some right information, right? That is until you realize your friend is looking in 2 directions and he is foaming at the mouth. In shock, you try to say something to him when all you can get out is a jumbled mess of slurred words, and you and your friend both pass out face down on the forest floor. The survival technique of eating what animals ate failed you both. And the reality is, animals are just better than you. And just because the animal can eat it doesn't mean you can eat it at all. Just think about it. Every animal has developed its own unique way of digestion, and the things that our bodies are able to safely process and consume typically come from thousands and thousands of years of consumption. And on top of this, some animals are just built different. Like cows, for example, they have 4 stomachs, and every animal processes the same foods differently. The bird that ate those red berries, for example, was able to pass the toxic seeds from those berries directly through its digestive system without any issues. And those seeds that are now a part of its excrement are now replanted and continuing the life cycle of those berries. But in your case, those seeds have been cracked open by your teeth and are now infecting your entire body with deadly toxins. And the chipmunk that was taking bites out of that small red mushroom has a specialized stomach acid that can neutralize the toxins within this deadly mushroom. However, you simply do not have the facilities to handle that. And the same mushroom that gives that chipmunk life gave you and your friend a near-death experience. Just because you saw an animal eating something does not mean it's not deadly for you. After a few hours being passed out on the floor, you and your friends slowly come to and pick yourselves up off the ground. Nonetheless, you and your friend decide it's time to get serious because the sun is soon setting and you guys need to eat food. You and your friend notice something fuzzy in the distance, and as you slowly approach it and peek over some bushes, you see a lonely old caribou walk slowly until it collapses right before your eyes. And while this is an unfortunate sight for you and your friend, this could be life or death. And in this instance, having an endless supply of high quality food in front of you is something you and your friend couldn't have even imagined. You both approach the caribou to ensure that it's no longer with you. And once you have that confirmation, you begin to prepare the animal. Fortunately, for once, you were able to put useful knowledge to good use. And shortly after preparing the animal, you and your friend are sitting at a campfire under a tree, under the stars, eating your first meal in what feels like forever. But as good as having a hearty meal feels, and as confident as you feel knowing you have a nearly endless supply of food, the reality is that you're not set for food at all. And while you might not realize it now, in the near future, eating this food alone could easily kill you. And the reason is simple but interesting. And it all comes down to biology. Your body simply can't digest protein without fat. And if your diet only consists of protein with no other micronutrient, your body could literally starve or develop protein poisoning. The term for this situation is called rabbit starvation, or the French-Canadian term caribou sickness. But they both refer to the protein poisoning I just mentioned. But the reality is if you are only eating direct, big game, lean protein, you are setting yourself up for failure. And it's because of this very real caribou sickness that beavers were extremely valuable to North American indigenous people, because beavers had such high amounts of fat, which is why beaver hunting and trapping was so important, not just for pelts, but also for fat, so that this fat could be consumed, allowing your body to properly digest the protein from the big game you also caught. Black bears are also a great source of animal fats, although it's much easier to trap a beaver than a black bear, for reasons we discussed earlier. But yeah, if you tried to live solely off of a big game carcass, you would soon find yourself suffering from a strange form of starvation, simply because your body needs protein, but it also needs other macronutrients to properly absorb and process this protein. Luckily for you and your friend, you're both blissfully ignorant to this fact, and you wouldn't be eating off this carcass for long enough to experience these symptoms. And after both of you have successfully filled your bellies, you decide that it's time to get some rest. You suggest to your friend that maybe you guys should build a quick shelter, just something to keep you guys safe. But your friend tells you that that's a waste of time and energy, and that you guys need to conserve your calories as much as possible right now. And you both simply lay down on the ground and close your eyes to sleep. But that sleep isn't peaceful at all. And only a few hours into your sleep, you wake up freezing cold, colder than the air temperature outside, and you're kind of at a loss. And the reason is rather simple. Laying directly on cold ground is a great way to rapidly reduce your body heat. Literally because the ground is stealing heat from your body and lowering your core body temperature, causing you to burn more calories to try to heat yourself back up, while also absorbing all of the extra heat that your body is generating. So in a cold environment like the one that you're in at night, you could not only lose body heat, but also experience hypothermia just by laying on the bare ground, which is why you'll see outdoorsy people swear by a ground mat. Consider it insulation to keep your body heat within you and not being stolen by the ground beneath you. And now that you understand that collecting debris to lay on is a worthy investment of calories, you quickly put together a bundle of grass and leaves to make something soft, but also to make something to insulate your body heat. And you make a makeshift mattress that's large enough for both you and your friend. And you roll your friend onto it, you lay beside him, conserving body heat, and you close your eyes and experience your first bit of rest. The following morning, you decide it's time to start your day and continue your adventure. You begin to inform your friend about last night's discovery and how sleeping on the ground is not okay. But before you can even finish making your point, your friend stops you and points ahead. Because what stands in your way is something you haven't noticed until now. A massive snow-capped mountain. And there's no way around it. You and your friend now need to begin hiking. Luckily, you and your friend are energized from a good night's sleep and at least some sort of food that doesn't almost kill you. And as you and your friend begin to climb through this mountain, the temperatures begin to get lower and lower. And it's at this point when you're able to make the point to your friend that body temperature is something you guys need to keep in mind in these survival situations. But as your friend brushes off your concern about body temperature, he tells you the only thing you guys should be concerned about right now is water. You begin to get nervous because now that you're halfway up this mountain and surrounded by snow, there's no water around you, but your friend laughs at you and reminds you that this snow is water. He grabs a handful of snow off the ground, which appears to be untouched, and begins to chow down on his solid water. And while to most this seems completely safe and logical, this is definitely not the most ideal way to consume water. The first risk that this poses is that this snow or ice could actually cause micro tears or cuts in your mouth, which could definitely cause problems down the line. But more importantly than that, consuming ice directly is a surefire way to lower your core body temperature, causing your body to work overtime to heat itself back up. Your friend may think that body temperature isn't an important ordeal, but you know that it's nothing to laugh at. And at this very moment, hypothermia is a much bigger risk to you than being dehydrated. But unfortunately, your friend is in a bit of a pickle. Because yeah, he was able to hydrate himself through all of the snow he just ate, but he's now shivering uncontrollably and he's hungrier than he was yesterday because his core body temperature has been lowered and his body is consuming as much calories as it can to heat itself back up. Now, you're thirsty as well, but you're not willing to go through that entire experience. And what you do is a lot more wise. You remember watching the Outdoor Boys YouTube channel, and luckily you had the same supplies that he did. You scoop up snow into some sort of metal tin, you put it over top of a propane heater, and you allow the snow to melt, and then you consume the pre-melted, ideally room temperature water, allowing your body to not have to reheat it once it's consumed. Your body can simply use it as is. And the benefit of using this method as well too, assuming you have access to some sort of heat source, is you can actually kill any bad bacteria. But assuming that's not a risk here, you're able to at least avoid the whole hypothermia your friend is now fighting. After this whole water debacle, you realize that your friend's only chance of regaining any sort of heat is by continuing to move. So you keep on your path going over the snow-capped mountain. Unfortunately, your friend is no longer shivering, but you and your friend are now facing a much different issue. You and your friend are now both sweating, which is good. Body heat at this point is not a concern at all. This shouldn't be an issue. And sure, you might smell a little bit later, but what is an issue is the base layer of what you and your friend are wearing. Before you even left, you and your friends were debating on whether or not you should wear your clothes in a certain order. And your friend, obviously being a bit more reckless, said it didn't matter at all. So he started by putting on a cotton undershirt, a cotton hoodie, and then put a jacket over top that was waterproof to help keep water out. You, on the other hand, wanting to be different, decided to wear a base layer that was more moisture wicking, but still followed that up with another hoodie and a waterproof jacket. Now here's the difference. While you and your friend are still sweating now, as soon as you guys stop and your body heat begins to go down, the sweat trapped in your clothes is going to be deadly. And if your base layer is made of cotton, that sweat isn't going anywhere anytime soon. And after hours of hiking, you and your friend decide to take a break, and you guys experience the effects of this firsthand. After only sitting for around 15 minutes, your friend is not only cold once again, but he is shivering worse than he was before. And like I mentioned, that's because now his cotton shirt is drenched with sweat. And when cotton gets wet, it loses its ability to insulate you, meaning that your friend has effectively put a cold conductor directly on his body, and also effectively removed a layer, making him at risk once again for hypothermia. Luckily for you, you unintentionally decided to dress and act appropriately. You didn't wear a cotton base layer, meaning that by the time you already sat down and relaxed, your shirt was slightly wet in your armpits, but the rest of your shirt was able to dry relatively quickly. And also, as you were hiking up the mountain, you decided to remove layers, allowing yourself to not get too hot or sweaty. And that is the reason why you're not experiencing hypothermia right now. Because as you can tell, getting sweaty in a cold survival situation could be life or death. And a good rule of thumb is, if it's cold enough to wear multiple layers, it's too cold to wear a cotton base layer or cotton at all. And while it may seem counterintuitive to remove layers when you're in a cold environment, if you are exerting energy and on the verge of sweating, it is best to remove these layers to prevent sweating as much as you can. As thick as your friend's plot armor is, he is struggling at this point, and still somehow alive. He is dealing once again with hypothermia, and you guys have no access to fire or anything to warm him up. Your friend randomly asks you if you have any alcohol on you, and coincidentally, you did. You had a small bottle of some pretty strong alcohol in your backpack, and you wondered why he wanted it. But before you could even ask him what he wanted it for, he grabbed the bottle out of your hands and chugged it. After wiping his mouth, he tells you that obviously drinking alcohol warms you up. It makes you feel warmer and increases your body temperature. And while I believe this is a myth we've all heard, it's been debunked numerous times, and it also is completely counterproductive. The origin of this myth is actually interesting and comes from a St. Bernard dog that was carrying a brandy flask around its neck, and this dog was saving people that was buried in the French Alps. And unfortunately, this brandy may help you feel better, but definitely won't make you better. If you've experienced the alcoholic beverage, then you've probably noticed the sensation at some point of warmth. And this isn't because the alcohol is raising your body temperature, it's actually because the alcohol is making your blood vessels dilate, stimulating the nerve endings in your skin. But it doesn't actually increase your body temperature. And if you are in a cold environment that is specifically life or death, this dilation of the blood vessels will cause your body temperature to fall and likely cause you to die much faster than you would have if you just stayed sober. So although alcohol may give you the simulation of warming up and potentially take your mind off of the pain you're in, it's definitely not doing you any favors in the survival department. Realizing the severity of the situation, you come to the conclusion that you need to get out of this mountain quick. And while your friend is incapacitated and breaths away from death, you realize your best bet was to turn your friend into a toboggan and ride him down the mountain like Mrs. Kwan in the Cat in the Hat movie. And in only a few minutes, you went from the top of a snow-capped mountain to a place you weren't in yet. You weren't in the forest anymore. You were on a beach. And luckily, it was warm enough to help you and your friend feel better, and you noticed that you were on an ocean. And this ocean could be your ticket to freedom. With both you and your friend being on your last brain cells, you both intuitively build a raft with absolutely no plan of going anywhere and no knowledge on any sort of nautical construction. Regardless, you make a makeshift raft and set sail, hoping that maybe somebody on the water will see you and save you. After hours of sitting on your raft, you and your friend are once again hungry. And while your friend is still sobering up, you decide your best bet is to look for some fish. You take a dive off your raft and you find yourself surrounded by a school of fish, but you're unable to catch any. That is, when you look through the school of fish and notice that a large shadow is approaching you. This isn't a big fish. This is a shark, and it's coming directly for you. You have nanoseconds to try to decide what your next move would be. And the first thing that comes to mind is movies and TV shows showing you that if you punch a shark, you're gonna be all right. So quickly and intuitively, as the shark approaches you, you don't move out of the way, you simply assume a karate stance and prepare to punch the shark. Now here's the deal. If you were actually going to go through with this, there's two likely outcomes. The first is that you are able to successfully punch the shark and scare it away, similar to the black bear, making it seem like you're not worthy prey. But the more likely outcome is that you extend your arm and have your arm ripped off by a shark and then have the rest of your body consumed shortly after. Underwater, you have almost no strength whatsoever. Like, just try throwing a full force punch next time you're in a pool underwater. It's gonna do almost nothing. And besides this, sharks are ruthless killing machines. Even if you could throw your strongest punch at a shark, it's not going to be phased. Combine that with your lack of agility in the water and the shark's endless agility in the water, your strike effectiveness in even misdirecting the shark is extremely low. If a shark was in your area, you could easily push it out of your way or misdirect it by pushing its head if you had the leverage to do so, but even that is potentially risky. But in the situation when a shark is coming at you with the intent of damage, your best bet is to attack sensitive areas, specifically by plunging your thumb into the shark's eye or gills. Really, the only two areas where you can cause significant damage and at least make the shark retreat temporarily. And so, in a last-minute split decision, you decide not to punch the shark, but to actually poke it in the eye, causing the shark to cry and turn around, leaving you alone, and giving you the chance to climb back on the raft with your friend. At this point, you and your friend have been through hell and back. Your friend more so than you, but you are both now laying on your back, looking up at the sky, exhausted. And at this point, accepting your fate and understanding that maybe this trip was a mistake. And as you slowly close your eyes and take what appear to be your last few breaths, you notice a white light appear in your vision. A light that is so bright and so inviting. And you hear a noise, an almost angelic noise. And before you get the chance to meet your maker, you are hit in the testicles by a rope ladder that was dropped on your raft. And you realize that this light was a spotlight from the same helicopter that dropped you off. And while the pain you are experiencing is unbearable, you realize that you and your friend are finally saved. You both climb the ladder and board the helicopter and feel like you have been given a second chance at life. As you both are flying home with the crew, the pilot asks you how your trip was and if you guys were able to enjoy the park that they left you in only a few miles out of town. And you and your friend look at each other and decide that it's better if you kept your stories to yourself and just told them you guys had fun, but that you wouldn't be returning anytime soon. The secret meaning behind every dream. Picture this. You tuck yourself into bed, getting cozy, ready for a well-deserved night's sleep, when almost instantly after closing your eyes and falling asleep, you find yourself having the most odd dream of all time. This dream is so vivid, in fact, that you wake up, remembering almost everything about this dream that you were just having. At first, this dream seems random and devoid of any meaning, but you decided to take a peek to see if it could possibly mean anything. And after taking a quick look on Google, you realize that you are not the first person to have this dream, and that there are many interpretations on on what it could possibly mean. Chances are, if you're watching this video, you've had a similar experience, which is why I wanted to describe all of the most common dream themes in one video. Dreams are so cool, but I think it's important to understand why we even dream in the first place. And to put it as briefly as possible, when we go to bed and rest our conscious minds, our subconscious minds are going to work to process all of the information from that day, trying to make sense of the world and everything that we experienced. Just imagine if every time you went outside and did something, you wrote down everything you saw and everything you did on a sticky note. By the end of the day, you would have a lot of sticky notes. And those sticky notes would probably need to be organized. That is what your subconscious mind is doing when you are sleeping. But what's interesting about that is that your subconscious mind does not speak the same language as you. Your conscious mind understands language and logic, although your subconscious mind understands the world through a different means, feelings, images, and metaphors. And that alone is a big reason why your dreams seem so random. I think social worker and sleep expert Suzanne Bergman described dreams best when she said, quote, "Dreams are a universal language, creating often elaborate images out of emotional concepts." But with that being said, although there is no solid scientific connection between certain dreams and specific emotional states, there is definitely implied meanings behind a handful of very common dreams. And in this video, I'm going to describe every single one of them. Let's begin. Dreaming of falling. I would bet money that almost everybody watching this video has had a similar experience to this. You go to bed, you lay down, you close your eyes, and you begin to feel yourself falling asleep. But just before you could fall fully asleep, your body jolts and you are woken up instantly. Now, I mentioned this one first because it is the most common dream of all time. And it's interesting because this jolt that actually wakes you up out of your dream isn't necessarily always associated with falling, although in most cases it is. And whether this spasm was accompanied by a dream or not, it still is the same thing. It is called a hyptic jerk, and it is actually an arousal of our primal instinct that allows us to quickly get up out of sleep and defend ourselves in a dangerous situation. Another place you actually see this response a lot is when people prank people that are sleeping. You'll notice that these sleeping people that are being pranked will quickly get up and assume some sort of offensive position, and it will typically take time for their mind to catch up to what their body's already doing. That is a major difference between the subconscious and conscious mind. But going back to the falling part of this dream, why do people dream about falling specifically? Just think about it. When you are falling, you are in likely the most vulnerable state you can be in. You are simply at the whim of gravity, waiting for whatever the outcome of this fall may be to happen. So for that reason, falling is a pretty good metaphor for feeling like you're losing control in your life, or at least fearful or anxious of losing that control. And this control could be anything. You could feel like you're losing control to bad habits. You could feel like you're losing control of who you truly are. You could feel like you're losing control of your life because your school schedule is so packed or your job is too overbearing. There are a plethora of life situations that could cause you to feel these feelings, but in most cases, when people experience a dream of falling, the most common interpretation of this is that the person experiencing that dream is feeling anxiety, fear, and most prominently, a sense of losing control. Being chased. Falling was definitely the most commonly reported dream, but I can only imagine that being chased was a close second, because for me personally, this is a dream that I've had throughout my entire life. And I would imagine you've had a similar dream as well. And the deeper or secret meaning behind this dream is actually pretty self-explanatory. And the commonly accepted meaning is that this dream is a feeling of avoidance. In the dream that you experienced, you could have been chased by a murderer, a monster, a killer, an animal, a bear, whatever it may be, but no matter what was chasing you or in what scenario, the usual suspect for this chasing dream to even come about is because of an inner conflict that you either subconsciously or maybe even consciously know that you're avoiding. And even with this small bit of context, things may start to make a bit more sense. Like for example, if you go to bed tonight and you just dream that you're being chased by a bear, you're going to wake up thinking you had a nightmare and it was random. But if you understand the context that typically in dreams where you're being chased, you are reminding yourself that there is an internal conflict that you have not resolved, then you can kind of put back the pieces and realize that, oh yeah, I wasn't really dreaming about a bear. My mind was just symbolizing the fact that I am totally avoiding dealing with X, Y, or Z in my life. And once again, there's a million things that you could be avoiding that you know you have to face. But because your subconscious mind is extremely creative and doesn't speak English, you end up getting a murderer or a bear chasing you in your sleep. Teeth falling out. We're starting to get a bit more niche here, but this is actually another dream that I have personally experienced. In my specific situation, I was just dreaming that I was in the bathroom and I looked in the mirror. And as I looked in the mirror, my teeth were extremely loose and I was actually able to touch them and they were just falling out. Obviously, this dream was rather disturbing and it grossed me out, and when I woke up, I remembered it vividly and was pretty unsettled by it. So unsettled that it caused me to actually Google what this could possibly mean. And it was that entire experience that later inspired this exact video. But with that being said, what could teeth falling falling out mean in a dream? Does it mean that you subconsciously know you need to brush your teeth more? And while in most cases that isn't the case, I would say that's definitely not impossible either. Like I said, this is all interpretation. And for example, if you did know that you had to brush your teeth and you weren't, and you dreamt about it, that could very well be the reason why. But in most cases, why people dream of their teeth falling out is much deeper and much more severe. In short, dreams of losing teeth is most often linked to stress, fear, and uncertainty. At this point, a common theme, but it goes a bit deeper. In some beliefs, teeth symbolize stability and security. So if your mind is creating dreams where this symbol of security and stability is just falling out of your mouth, that could be a representation of how you feel in your waking life. Do you have a pain that you are just simply not addressing, or are you simply stressed out? Any of these situations could potentially cause you to have a dream about losing your teeth. And if you've personally ever experienced a similar sort of dream, think about what was going on in your life during the time, and if there was anything that you could pinpoint that could have potentially caused this dream. Losing your hair. Similar to the situations we discussed previously with losing your teeth, a dream about losing your hair can typically be caused by similar experiences, although there's a bit of a twist. Because where teeth in some places represent stability and security, hair represents beauty and youth. And in that context, a dream about losing your hair is typically associated with a feeling of stress or vulnerability around someone's self-esteem, whether it be the fear of aging or an insecurity of your personal looks, potentially triggered by some sort of bullying. And while this niche interpretation seems logical, there's also more general associations around having a hair loss dream, specifically feeling like you're losing control of some aspect of your life or feeling, once again, vulnerable. Already, we're starting to see a common theme among different dreams, but I think it's important to reiterate these things and also highlight the differences and nuances. Drowning. Drowning may be one of the most unsettling of the common dreams we're going to be discussing in this video, because I think the situation for many, myself included, is a true worst possible fear, which just makes the lifelike situation in your dream feel even more unsettling. Regardless, if you have experienced this dream, what could it possibly mean? And similar to the first dream we discussed of falling, drowning has a very similar interpretation, specifically feeling either overwhelmed or, once again, out of control in your life. But it does go a bit deeper than that, because drowning is typically associated with the feeling of being smothered. And while there is an endless amount of things that could make you feel smothered in life, these dreams are typically triggered by either a situation that is so overbearing, emotions that are at this point too strong to care anymore, or responsibilities that you have that you feel like are literally drowning you. Drowning, like falling, is another situation where you are completely out of control. It's you versus Mother Nature. And while you may not be falling, waiting to hit the ground, with drowning, I think it might almost be worse, because you are consistently fighting against the waves in the water, just trying to stay afloat, knowing that eventually you're going under. If you've personally experienced a drowning dream, try to reflect. Was this around a time where you felt overwhelmed by something in your life? Potentially you just had too much on your plate with school, sports, life, family, friends. Maybe you were going through something really tough and the emotions were just too much to bear at times. Like I mentioned, all of these dreams are different interpretations, and they could also be triggered by a number of life situations. But most typically, drowning is interpreted as feeling overwhelmed and out of control. Fighting. Fighting dreams are very common, but also, interestingly, very intense. Now, that sounds a bit odd to say on this list where most of these dreams are intense, but I think out of all of them, fighting is some of the most intense because it literally activates the neurochemicals that would activate your fight, flight, or freeze response. But that being said, if you have this dream about fighting, what does it mean? And there's actually, obviously, a lot of interpretations, but there's a few primary ones depending on who you're fighting. If you have a dream about physically fighting somebody that you know in your daily life, let's say this is a friend of yours, that dream would typically be symbolic that you have some sort of unsettled trauma or dispute or negative emotions that have not been fully sorted out. And this dream could be your subconscious mind trying to remind you that we need to do something about this situation. And I think this interpretation is somewhat obvious. I think this is one of those dreams that you don't necessarily need to Google. Like if you had a dream about fighting your friend and you knew that this friend owed you money, you could be able to put two and two together. Although if you had this dream and you didn't think you had any issue with your friend, but then you sat and thought about it and realized that, oh, actually, last time I saw this guy, he said something that rubbed me the wrong way, but I kind of let it slide. Maybe this might be a good opportunity to bring that situation up to him and be like, hey, that thing, whatever the case may be. Now, here's where things get interesting. If this person in your dream that you are fighting is not somebody that you know or recognize, or maybe doesn't even have a face at all, they're like a character that you haven't unlocked yet, what this typically symbolizes is that you have some internal conflict that you are trying deeply to resolve. And this could go for a lot of things. Perhaps you're at a crossroads in your life and you don't know which way to go. This dream could be representing your indecision. Or perhaps you're doing something that you know you shouldn't be doing, or you're not doing what you should be doing. This dream, once again, could interpret your better self trying to bring you out of a slump, but you're fighting a version of yourself that is still falling into bad habits. And when you get into dream lore, you kind of learn about something known as the shadow self, which is essentially a subconscious version of you, but that may be kind of beyond the scope of this video. Regardless, fighting dreams almost always symbolize an internal conflict, whether that be an internal conflict against yourself, a situation you're facing, or even how you feel about another person. And depending on who you're fighting, that could be a major clue into what kind of situation you are subconsciously dealing with. Being naked in public. Okay, this one isn't just a dream, it's the dream. Totally joking, but I'm glad that this one isn't as tense as the other ones, although the meaning is still just as serious. I think this is another one of those dreams that isn't necessarily extremely difficult to try to decode on a surface level, but there are some nuances that we'll get into. I think intuitively we kind of all understand that a dream of being naked in a public place can be symbolic for feeling vulnerable, but I think even taking it a step deeper than that, this imagery can be symbolic of insecurities that you're feeling, a need for acceptance, or potentially a fear of judgment or criticism. If you're at a place in your life where you feel like you are under immense pressure and being judged and criticized at every move, you may be dreaming of being naked because for how much you're being judged in your day-to-day life, you might as well just be naked because everybody looks at you so weird and sees you as alien, or at least that may be how your subconscious mind, understands that criticism. When you get criticized or called out, you feel exposed. You feel literally vulnerable and alone, and the same sort of situation exists when you are naked in public. You're the only person with no clothes on and everybody's looking at you. This dream is funny to think about, but it's definitely an uncomfortable dream to have, and it's once again rooted in some pretty serious negative emotions. Being pregnant. Now, this is specifically if you're having a dream about being pregnant while not being pregnant. I think if you're pregnant and have a dream about being pregnant, you're just having a dream. I don't think there's necessarily a special meaning there, but interestingly, it's said that this dream isn't necessarily limited to just women, and that men could also have this dream of being pregnant. And if you're a man who has had this dream, drop it in the comments. But this is also the first dream that we've discussed that doesn't have a negative connection to it, actually, which is a nice change of pace. And dreams of being pregnant typically symbolize new beginnings, personal growth, or the anticipation of a significant life change. And if you look at it that way, it kind of makes sense why your subconscious mind would illustrate these things as pregnancy. If you think about pregnancy, it's a similar thing. It's a new beginning. There is literally personal growth, and there is a huge life change coming. And I guess with all of these dreams, or potentially any dream you could have, if you understand the context that a dream is just your subconscious mind that communicates through images and feelings trying to understand the world, then you can almost reverse engineer these things to see what's really going on. And it's that exact reverse engineering process that's given us all of these kind of interpretations, because like I mentioned, they're interpretations. They're not scientifically proven. They're just commonly accepted representations. And so far, I think a lot of them make sense. And for some of them, I've experienced exactly the situation and the exact feelings that they've described. So if you're a woman who's had a dream about being pregnant, or if you're a man who's had a dream about being pregnant, understand that this isn't necessarily a bad thing. And it doesn't just mean that you're going to be pregnant in the near future. I mean, potentially it could mean that depending on what you believe or how you interpret it. But in most cases, it's just a simple representation of personal change, personal growth, and new beginnings either ongoing or in the near future. Death. Taking almost a 180 from dreams of being pregnant, we have dreams of dying. Now, interestingly, dreams of dying have typically very similar associations to dreams of being pregnant, which is why I put them side by side. Now, on the surface, a dream of yourself personally dying could be one of the scariest and most upsetting dreams you can have. And in some cases, and in some cultures, this dream is taken literally, and it means that, oh, this is a sign that I'm gonna die soon. Which, I mean, depending what you believe, maybe it could be the case, but in most instances, that isn't the case at all, and that's typically not what your subconscious is trying to tell you. Similar to how your subconscious mind illustrates a new beginning as a pregnancy, your brain could also take the same input and illustrate death. But this isn't necessarily the death of you. This could be the death of a chapter in your life. Whether it be you start a new relationship, you end a relationship, you start a new job, you start thinking a different way, you start working out, whatever major life change is happening in your life, there is a death of the old version of yourself, and potentially even the death of something in your life, like a job or a schooling system or whatever the case may be. So it's interesting to think, if you've ever had a dream of yourself personally dying, is there anything that was going on at the time that was a big pivotal moment for you that ended up being ideally positive? This dream could have been extremely scary and you might have even considered it to be a nightmare, but perhaps your mind wasn't necessarily representing your death, but it was representing the death of something in your life. Now, that kind of goes out the window if your dream was, you getting murdered or hit by a car. Like, I feel like depending on how gruesome your death was, potentially there's more going on there, and it kind of leans into some of the other things we've discussed with, with feeling out of control and feeling stressed out and overwhelmed. I would say if you had a gruesome death, you're probably not like, yeah, this is a new beginning. This is why I dreamt of getting hit by an 18-wheeler. Like, I don't think that's the connection, but yeah. It's typically believed that symbolically, a dream of death can be the metaphor of a chapter of your life closing, allowing a new chapter to begin. Meeting a lost loved one. If you've ever lost a loved one, whether it be a parent, a grandparent, a sibling, whoever it may be, then you've probably had a dream about them at some point after their passing. And you've maybe even wanted to dream about them just to have more communication with them. Now, with this specific, very sensitive issue, there is a lot of interpretations and beliefs surrounding them. And while that obviously goes for all of these entries, I want to make that explicitly clear for this one as well. For people who have had a dream of meeting a loved one once again after their passing, it's typically believed that this dream is symbolic of an individual reflecting on the relationship that they had with this lost individual, or potentially even them grieving this lost individual and desiring a deep connection with them once again. And like I mentioned, it makes sense if you think about it. If you've lost a loved one and, that is just gone now, your subconscious mind is going to have to do a lot of work to try to comprehend what that even means. And that person may be interjected into your dream as a result. And some interpretations include that if you meet a lost loved one in your dream, that is that lost loved one specifically trying to contact you, or I guess successfully contacting you to let you know that they have made it to the other side and that they are with you and whatever they may say to you in the dream, if they say anything at all. So this one is interesting because there's a lot of ways you could take it. It could be a representation of you trying to deal with the loss of this person and trying to understand your new relationship with them after them being gone, or it can even be them communicating with you from the other side. But whatever you may believe, it's interesting to understand these dreams and try to ponder them when they happen. But I do think this entry is likely the most self-explanatory on the list. You're dreaming about a lost loved one because you're thinking about a lost loved one. But regardless, it's a pretty straightforward dream. Although there's still a ton to unpack around it. Snakes. Before we get to the last common dream on this list, I just want to say that there is a ton more of crazy and common dreams I want to discuss. But time is limited for every video. So if you want a part 2 with more common dreams, either leave a like or leave a comment below letting me know that you want that video, and I'll be more than happy to make it. Oh, and if you're enjoying this video and watch us often, feel free to subscribe. It turns out a good majority of you guys aren't even subscribed, but if you enjoyed the video, you might as well. It's free, and I hear it gives you good dreams. But back to snakes. Snakes are one of the most interesting dreams I've researched for this video. Specifically because I could not get one solid read. Like I mentioned, every dream I discussed is open to interpretation, and there are plenty of interpretations, but typically there is an underlying common denominator. When it comes to snakes, literally everything was just straight up contradictory. Like, even if you just Google, what does it mean if you dream about snakes? It will literally say in the same sentence, healing and hidden threats. But with that being said, what are some of the more common understandings of seeing snakes in dreams? And it really depends on the context you see this snake in. Now, if you see this snake in a neutral context and it's just kind of in an outdoor environment and you see it go by and it's not a negative experience, that could actually be a positive symbol, typically meaning transformation and healing, because snakes are known for shedding their skin, starting anew. That could be, once again, another symbol of rebirth, transformation, healing. That's pretty positive. But if you're having a dream where you're being chased by a snake, that kind of goes back to our initial dream of being chased. You feel like you are running away or being followed by something that you are avoiding that is at this point becoming overwhelming and needs to be dealt with. Now, a bit more nuanced, if you see a snake that's in your personal home or in a safe space where a snake should not be, and you are personally scared of this snake in this environment, then this may be a sign that in your life you are dealing with either hidden dangers or hidden threats from people in your life. You might feel like someone might not have your best interest in mind, whether it be a friend, a coworker, a peer, whoever it may be, or this snake might even represent something that you're doing to yourself. Once again, referring to that shadow work or that shadow version of yourself. So it's just interesting because snakes could represent a plethora of things. It really just kind of comes down to the context of which you see it. A snake in nature could represent rebirth. A snake chasing you could represent you avoiding an issue in your life. A snake in your house could represent you feeling unsafe or threatened. And a snake in your boot might mean that you're in Toy Story. But what do you guys think? If you guys have experienced any of these dreams? Please let me know in the comments below. And what do you guys think of these interpretations? If you have any additional interpretations, please leave them in the comments. I know that almost every religion and culture has their own interpretations and versions of what these dreams could mean, and I'd love to hear them more in the comments. What I'm saying here is not fact or even personal opinion. It's just more or less a common understanding of what some people interpret these dreams to mean. But this is very much so an open conversation and not a closed book. And if you are waiting for a part 2, let me know a common dream that you want to know the meaning of in the comments below. Common things science still can't explain. Fingerprints. That's right. The first entry on this list is something that we all have access to at our fingertips. And that's because it literally is our fingertips, or more specifically, our fingerprints. I think we all know that everybody has fingerprints, and beyond that, we all have unique fingerprints. And we also know that the fingerprints your cousin leaves on the glass in every device is really annoying. But beyond the existence and uniqueness of fingerprints, what is there not to know? And the answer is, well, the purpose of fingerprints to begin with. Interestingly, we actually know a lot more about the origin of fingerprints rather than the purpose of fingerprints. Obviously, in modern times, the fingerprint is an extremely useful tool, most commonly used in forensics investigations and also while opening your iPhone 6. And while those are definitely interesting use cases for our fingertips, the human body didn't spend hundreds of thousands of years just to develop fingerprints for biometric data purposes. And like the title of this video suggests, the true purpose of fingerprints is still relatively unknown, although there is 2 primary theories. But before we get into those, I want to actually explain quickly how we even get fingerprints in the first place. When you were a little fetus in your mother's womb, your fingerprints surprisingly were one of the earliest defining features developed on your entire body, obviously after your arms and hands. And these unique designs are carved into your fingertips through the pressure of amniotic fluid in your mother's womb. The pressure of this fluid, coupled with the growth rate of your fingers and other unique factors, are what cause the consistently unique design of your fingerprint, which is really interesting. Your fingerprint isn't genetic whatsoever, and identical twins do not share the same fingerprint. And that same fingerprint you develop early on in your mother's womb, you will keep until the day you die, which is also super interesting. But not quite as interesting as the 2 running theories on why we even have fingerprints in the first place. The first theory is that we have fingerprints to improve grip. This theory states that the grooves on your finger act like tread on a tire and are intended to allow you to grip, hold, and throw things easier. And this theory makes sense and is definitely valid, and there is even evidence to support this claim. And the other primary theory for why we have fingerprints is actually for tactile reasons. This theory states that we have fingerprints to help us sense vibrations and to feel textures more fully and effectively, enhancing our sense of touch. And once again, there is evidence to support this claim as well. And while both of these theories are valid and seem extremely logical, and both share evidence that can back up their claims, there's not yet any concrete evidence proving a specific purpose for your fingerprint. Alzheimer's. If you're watching this video, it's likely that you don't have Alzheimer's. But if you do have Alzheimer's, then it's likely you've seen this video before and just don't remember it. Regardless, Alzheimer's is unfortunately more common than you think, and most people watching this video have likely experienced Alzheimer's in one way or another. The reality of Alzheimer's is horrifying and truly upsetting, and that is coming from a bystander's perspective. I can only imagine the experience of somebody dealing with the trauma firsthand. But for how common Alzheimer's is and how much awareness is being brought to it these days, there are still so many things that are just completely unknown when it comes to Alzheimer's. I think it's important to note first and foremost that Alzheimer's and dementia are not the same thing, and while they are related, they're not interchangeable. And on top of that, Alzheimer's is not a natural part of human progression. While cognitive decline is normal as you age, the rapid and detrimental decline that happens with Alzheimer's is nowhere near normal. And for that reason, it's not called old-timers, it's called Alzheimer's. And I'm not even making this up. When I was a kid, I swear to God, I thought it was called old-timers because old people got it. And I'm just really hoping I'm not the only one who thought that. But tossing my own personal cognitive decline to the side, what is the cause of Alzheimer's? And the answer is complicated. As of today, the most common theory is that a combination of age-related brain changes, genetic factors, and environmental and lifestyle influences play a role in the development of Alzheimer's, although the exact biological root cause of the disease is still unknown. Basically meaning that there's a lot of ways you could potentially get Alzheimer's, like smoking all your life, or working shift work and having a bad circadian rhythm, or potentially being genetically predisposed. And while all of these may be a contributing factor, there's not yet one underlying causality. But with that being said, as of now, there are still 2 primary biomarkers that are believed to be tied to Alzheimer's. The first is amyloid beta plaques. And what amyloid beta plaques are actually buildup of amyloid beta, which is a part of amyloid precursor protein. What does amyloid precursor protein do in the brain, you might ask? Science doesn't know that either, but it's believed, but not proven, to have something to do with brain development. Regardless, patients with Alzheimer's will see this amyloid beta protein not being properly absorbed in the brain, causing it to clump together and create plaques, causing the eventual rapid decline in cognition. And the reason for this is because these amyloid plaques are actually toxic to the brain and cause cell death within your brain, which is why typically in Alzheimer's patients, you will see brains with massive holes in them, which honestly just adds a whole new layer of disturbing to this disease. But even the role of these amyloid plaques are debated, because recently there have been medications specifically designed to destroy these amyloid plaques in the brain. And unfortunately, these tests have not bred positive results, which has caused scientists to question whether or not this plaque is the root cause or simply a byproduct of a deeper, more unknown root cause. Oh yeah, and the other biomarker associated with Alzheimer's is another protein used in the brain known as tau. And similar to the other protein we just discussed, for patients with Alzheimer's, the tau in the brain is not used properly and is not absorbed and becomes tangled and creates, once again, toxic clumps in the brain, causing cell death and cognitive decline. So yeah, although it may seem like we know quite a bit about Alzheimer's, there's so much more we have to learn before we are able to make any sort of meaningful development in prevention and hopefully cure. Animal migration. Migration by far is one of the most underrated animal superpowers. Like seriously, just imagine being able to be anywhere and being able to then navigate to a specific location, usually across an entire continent, just because. Migration is a necessary survival mechanism for countless species of animals. And it's actually really well understood why certain species migrate. The reason depends on the species, but the most common reasons for migration are either to feed, breed, or to escape harsh climates like cold winters or hot summers. And that is simple and something we truly understand. But it's not the why of migration that's unexplained, it's the how. Like just think about it. How do these animals know consistently year over year not only when to go, but exactly where to go? You could give a lot of people today a car and a physical roadmap and they would still get lost trying to go to a specific location. But if you just tell a butterfly that they've got to fly 2,000 miles to get laid, they're already gone before you could even tell them what direction to go. And it's so amazing, in fact, that we still to this day don't understand how animals know where to migrate, or more specifically, how to get to their point of migration. Birds, whales, sea turtles, and even insects are all examples of animals that migrate. And for most of them, the places they go to migrate are rather specific, although where they may be living in their off-season is kind of random. However, every year, they consistently know, no matter where they are, where to go. And that phenomenon is truly amazing. And while in 2025, humans have GPS, Google Maps, and now self-driving cars, we still get lost a lot. And this thought process has led researchers to believe that animals have something that we don't. And recent studies have shown that this could potentially be true. And one example that research has recently shown was that some species of birds, specifically pigeons, were able to sense the Earth's magnetic field. And first of all, I'm just curious how they even found this out in the first place. Like, I can only imagine two scientists just sitting a pigeon down in the lab, looking at him and just asking, "Do you feel anything?" With the pigeon only to respond, "North." And this is a skill known as magnetoreception. And I'll be honest, I wish I had magnetoreception, because that sounds cool as hell. Regardless, with the discovery of pigeons being able to sense the Earth's literal magnetic field, this one answer has led to many more questions. Like, how many other animals share this ability? And what other abilities exist in the animal kingdom that we don't even know about yet? And for animals with this ability, how do they even use this knowledge of the magnetic field to navigate properly and accurately? It's truly amazing. And I guess the human equivalent of this would be trying to understand how your broke, drunken uncle always makes his way down to Florida every time winter comes in Michigan. Like, your drunken uncle could be anywhere in the northern hemisphere for 7 months out of the year. But somehow, as soon as it just gets a little chilly, he teleports to Florida. But nobody knows how he got there. It's just like that. The placebo effect. The placebo effect is a staple in modern medicine testing because of how prevalent this effect is. To summarize the placebo effect, it's essentially just suggestibility. It's your mind believing something to be true and your body kind of following suit. And while that's a bit of an oversimplification, the results of the placebo effect are amazing, but also mysterious. The placebo effect is so strong and so common that anytime a new drug is tested to bring to market, they literally have to test the new drug that's being proposed against a placebo to make sure that the drug is actually effective and not just seeming effective due to the placebo effect. For example, let's just say you're trying to develop a new drug that helps people with stomach pain. Now, let's say for a study, you find 100 people that have frequent stomach pain. You divide this group into two smaller groups, a treatment group in a placebo group. All 50 people in the treatment group receive the actual medication you're testing, and all 50 people in the placebo group receive, well, a sugar pill, a placebo, a drug that does nothing. It's not even a drug. Now here's the kicker. Everybody in this test is under the assumption that they are actually taking the active medicine. And after consistently taking the medicine for, let's say, a week, you have to review the results. And this is where the placebo effect actually comes into play. Because let's say after a week of taking the placebo, 25 out of the 50 people in the placebo group say that they noticed less stomach pain. That is kind of the benchmark that the treatment group has to surpass. Meaning that if the treatment group also reports a 25% decrease in stomach pain, it's actually not proven effective. In that case, it's about as effective as a placebo. For this medication for stomach pain to be proven effective, there has to be more people in the treatment group that feel better than people in the placebo group. And this oversimplified, poorly explained explanation is what's known as a double-blind placebo study. And it's kind of the gold standard for eliminating bias when it comes to testing brand new medications. Now here's the thing. With all of this being said, how does the placebo effect even work? And the answer is, we actually don't know that much about it. Researchers that have been studying the placebo effect from a psychological and neurological angle both kind of believe that this effect is linked to a brain's release of endorphins and other chemicals in the anticipation of a positive effect, essentially meaning that because your body is expecting to feel better, it already kind of feels better in advance. But this isn't proven and is really only a going theory. And despite there being literally decades of study on the placebo effect up until this point, the exact mechanisms behind the placebo effect are completely unknown, making one of the staples of modern medicine testing an effective and life-saving mystery. The Twilight Zone. No, not that Twilight Zone, this Twilight Zone. Home of this, and this. The Twilight Zone is located 200 to 1,000 meters below the ocean surface. And it's known as the Twilight Zone because it is a region underwater where sunlight barely penetrates. It's too dark for any sort of photosynthesis, but it's not quite pitch black yet. And it's this unique region that is one of the least explored habitats on all of planet Earth. One notable resident of this area is the lanternfish, which is pretty cool, but also completely insane, and kind of goes to show how weird this area is. Like, we all know that jellyfish are like just weird creatures, but deep sea jellyfish are on a whole nother level. Like, I was just watching a documentary where some jellyfish literally asexually reproduce and basically just spawn new jellyfish, kind of like plants. And jellyfish as a whole are just kind of crazy entities. Like, they're alive, but they're not. It's just so wild. But that's not the mystery here. It has nothing to do with jellyfish per se. The Twilight Zone, like I mentioned, is one of the least explored areas, and for good reason too. The pressure that deep underwater is immense, and coupling that pressure with the sheer darkness and travel time and specialized equipment required to even navigate through this area makes any sort of Twilight Zone exploration extremely expensive and difficult. And because there's not really a major financial incentive to explore the Twilight Zone, research is definitely a bit slow. But not only is the Twilight Zone extremely harsh to get to and be in, but it's also extremely vast, making exploring and documenting it nearly impossible fully. And because the Twilight Zone is so massive, it's actually speculated that there may be more fish in the Twilight Zone alone than all other fish on the entire Earth combined. And while this is kind of a fruitless thought experiment, at this point, it's also extremely possible. But not only is it possible, it's a scary thought, because the fish that live in the Twilight Zone are completely weird looking, and probably the closest thing we have to aliens at this time. Like, these fish are literally creating their own light, which is kind of dope. I don't know, I think bioluminescence is just cool to begin with, but I also like to think that fish just got so fed up of being in the dark that they literally created their own organic light. But it's not just seeing cool fish that light up that makes the Twilight Zone interesting. It's also the impact that the Twilight Zone has on the Earth's climate, because the Twilight Zone is a massive ecosystem. And ocean and marine ecosystems specifically play a major role when it comes to carbon storage, which obviously has a direct impact on the Earth's climate, which definitely gives merit to wanting to explore the Twilight Zone more. But yeah, that's kind of all there is to say about it. The Twilight Zone is one of the most common ecosystems in all of the world, technically speaking, although it's one of the ecosystems we know the least about. And maybe that's for the better. Ball lightning. Admittedly, ball lightning isn't all that common, but lightning is relatively common. And I think most of us have heard about ball lightning, and honestly, I just thought it was cool and wanted to discuss this interesting phenomenon. Ball lightning sightings have gone back all the way to the 1600s and continue to be reported today. It's interesting because even today in 2025, we don't know a ton about ball lightning. So I can only imagine what they thought about ball lightning in the 1600s. Ironically, we do know what they thought about ball lightning in the 1800s, as there was a few recorded accounts of experiences with ball lightning, and they basically just described ball lightning as smelling like sulfur and being the work of the devil, which I think is fitting for the time period. In case you're unfamiliar, ball lightning is typically described by witnesses as a glowing, floating sphere of light, and like regular lightning, typically only appears during thunderstorms. Some people have stated that these balls are only as small as a marble, while others have said that they've been multiple feet long and wide. And the colors that the ball lightning has been reported in is almost as vast as the size, with some people claiming that it was white, yellow, orange, or even blue. But in case ball lightning wasn't unpredictable enough, the way it behaves is also completely unpredictable. Ball lightning can last anywhere from a split second to multiple minutes long. And during the duration of its stay, it typically moves slowly through the air and can even pass through windows or walls, typically causing no damage whatsoever. And in some cases, ball lightning simply vanishes silently. And in other cases, it literally explodes with a loud bang. And already, ball lightning seems like one of the most amazing and also terrifying things you could witness in person. And I can only imagine what witnessing it would be like if you didn't know what ball lightning was. There's actually a video of a Belarusian train station that shows a ball of lightning crossing over all of the train tracks, and it's just amazing to see. And in the comments of this video, there's a ton of people talking about their experience with ball lightning and how the first time they saw it, they thought it was an angel or a ghost or something else that was typically supernatural, which I don't blame them for. If I just saw this thing in front of me in person, I would literally believe I was losing my mind or something really bad was happening. Like, I would not be in awe, I would be in terror. But that's just me. If I don't know about something, I typically lean towards being scared about it. But no matter how cool or interesting or terrifying ball lightning may seem, it's more mysterious than anything else. Obviously, scientists don't have a concrete answer on what ball lightning is or what even causes it. But there are a few interesting theories I'd like to share with you. A couple popular theories that try to explain why ball lightning happens include plasma, burning particles in the air, and even electromagnetic fields. And honestly, they're all kind of vague explanations and potentially could be partially true, but like I mentioned, we just don't know. And one of the biggest reasons why we don't know is because of how rare ball lightning is. It's almost impossible to replicate in a controlled environment, meaning that we're at the mercy of nature providing it to us to study it. And as you can imagine, ball lightning doesn't roll into a lot of labs all that often. And well-equipped scientists typically don't run into ball lightning all that often either, leaving a lot of the thought around ball lightning to be up to speculation and based off of reviewing videos posted online. And if you've made it this far in the video, let me know. If you saw ball lightning out in the wild, would you be terrified or would you be intrigued? I think the honest answer is both. And I guess while we're being honest, let me ask you, do you like watching Trust Me Bro videos? Because if you do, feel free to subscribe. We make videos every single week. Now, let's get on to the last section. Slime mold. Slime mold, or scientifically known as Physarum polycephalum, is not mold, nor slime, nor fungi. It's actually known as a protist. And what makes it unique is that it's actually a single-celled organism. That's right, this jelly-looking, goo-looking thing is actually one organism, although it is full of nuclei. That's right, it might be a single cell, but this one cell has so many nuclei within it. And all of these nuclei actually will come in handy later. Now you might be asking, what's the significance of this yellowy, greeny goo? And is it even common? I've never seen that. And let me answer both of those questions. First of all, is it common? Yeah. If you've gone on a walk in a forest after a rainy day, you have definitely walked past some sort of slime mold. And to answer your first hypothetical question, why does it matter? Well, slime molds are extremely intelligent. So intelligent, in fact, that we don't know how they're so smart or why they're so smart. And that is both interesting and terrifying. How smart is slime mold, you may ask? Well, slime molds have been shown time in and time out to solve mazes consistently. And how they do this is by basically filling up the entire maze with their gooey body. And once they find the exit of the maze, or in the case of the research test, finding the food, they will then retract everything else that isn't directly connecting the start of the slime mold to the food, allowing them to essentially reverse engineer the maze. And these mazes aren't simple either. Some studies have actually been able to have slime molds recreate major transportation networks, like the Tokyo subway system, for example. But not only can slime mold navigate to find food, they've also shown to have some sort of memory by anticipating reoccurring events. And how this is shown is by having them readjust their behavior based off of previous events that have happened in previous studies, proving that these single-celled organisms have some sort of memory even though they have not one neuron. That's right, slime molds have no brain, no nervous system, no complex organs, but they still seemingly can solve problems, make decisions, and even remember past events. And I'll be the first to say it, I'm impressed with this little ball of goo. And this little ball of goo might even be smarter than you. But if you think the ball of goo is not smaller than you, then for who the ball of goo is not smaller than you too? Okay, it is currently 1:53 a.m. and I thought that was funny. I didn't even think that was funny, I just said it. Regardless, the ways in which slime molds achieves any sort of intelligence to scientists is completely unclear. Although, like some of the other entries on this list, the scientists have their theories. And what's currently believed is that the network-like structure of neurons within the slime mold allows the slime mold to process information through chemical signals, essentially allowing it to have a brain without having a brain. And this method of thinking, or I guess thoughtlessness, on the slime mold's part has actually inspired scientists in specific fields like robotics and computing to try to use slime molds to find clues on how to build more efficient self-organizing systems, seeing as the slime mold's pretty good at doing that. And while there's not much more known about the slime mold's intelligence at this time, the fact that this single-celled organism can seemingly think without a brain has definitely inspired engineers and scientists alike. But for now, the mind of this little ball of goo is an enigma. Real-life glitches you experience every day. It was a crisp January morning, and you were waking up at the ass crack of, well, 2 p.m. You see, it's January 1st, New Year's Day, and you spent the night previously getting wasted, and you have a massive hangover. Regardless, you promised yourself that you would make 2026 the best year of your life. No more messing around, no more junk food, no more glitches. All you wanted to do this year was lock in. Although, unfortunately, this year was about to be full of glitches and, well, not locking in whatsoever. Despite your head pounding and stomach feeling upside down, you decide to take a big stretch and get out of bed. But as you reach your arms above your head and bring them back down, you hit your elbow on your headboard and feel an electric shock go from the tip of your finger to the top of your shoulder. You are only seconds into consciously experiencing the new year, and you are already experiencing your first real-life glitch. You see, there are plenty parts of your body that if you bump it, it hurts. But for some reason, there are a few molecules specifically in your elbow that give you one of the most shocking pains that is both terrifying and extremely short-lived. And I know if you're watching this video, then you've definitely hit your funny bone at some point in your life. And statistically speaking, at least a few of you watching have done so today. But to anybody who's ever hit their funny bone, it's rather obvious that A, there's nothing funny about this experience, and B, the sensation you get from hitting your funny bone is unlike any other experience on your body. But yeah, we all kind of know what the funny bone experience is like, but not many of us know how this glitch even happens. And the reason why we have a funny bone is kind of unique. The funny bone is obviously not a bone at all. What's referred to as the funny bone is actually a small stretch of the ulnar nerve, which is closest to the skin in the elbow area. The ulnar nerve runs basically from your neck down to your hand. Now, interestingly, for the most part, the ulnar nerve in your forearm and upper arm is kind of protected by muscle and fat. However, when this nerve passes over your elbow close to the skin, it is at its most vulnerable. And what the ulnar nerve is vulnerable to is being compressed or bumped, both of which obviously can happen when you hit your elbow on something. While it may sound severe to have an electric shock shot through your body, and the fact that you have such a severe reaction to this bump, the reality is that this glitch is extremely normal and common, and like I mentioned, happens to basically everybody. And if you've ever bumped your elbow and thought that you broke something or had permanent nerve damage, then I have good news for you, because actually, that's not the case whatsoever. Hitting your funny bone is not a sign of nerve damage, and in the vast majority of cases is completely harmless, which is a W. And I wish I knew that when I was a paranoid little bro, scared that I broke my elbow, when in reality, I just hit the nerve at the wrong point. Now, while this electric shock going through your arm would be enough motivation for most people to finally get out of bed, your hangover is telling you that you could use just a few more minutes. And because you decide to start 2026 like a true grinder and hustle culture bro, you set an alarm for 1 hour and go back to bed. But it wouldn't be long after closing your eyes and slowly fading into sleep that you experience your second glitch of the day. That glitch being the hypnic jerk. Just picture this. I'm sure we've all been there. You're laying in your bed, you're closing your eyes, and you can feel yourself drifting off to sleep. And just as you're in that twilight between wakefulness and unconsciousness, you feel yourself instantly jolt, almost as if you've just fallen or completely lost your balance. This jolt, or jerk, is completely involuntary, and is once again another real-life glitch. Fortunately, similar to hitting your funny bone, the hypnic jerk is not a sign of anything wrong, and is in most cases completely harmless and completely normal. However, that doesn't make it any less scary in the moment, because the shift of state from basically sleeping to the most alert you've ever been is, well, pretty staggering. Regardless, I'm sure we all understand the feeling of the hypnic jerk, and I don't need to explain the experience. But what I do want to explain is exactly why this happens. And the answer is unfortunately not super satisfying, because there is not a definitive answer to this question yet. However, there are leading theories that are logical and likely the case. The leading theory about hypnic jerks as of now is that in this transition between being awake and being asleep, sometimes your body can kind of miscommunicate with with itself and interpret signals wrong. And in the case of hypnic jerks, what's happening is as your muscles begin to relax and as your mind and body are transitioning from being awake to sleeping, somewhere in your brain, somebody is hitting the alarm button because part of your brain is interpreting this relaxation of muscles as essentially a loss of control. More specifically, a loss of balance or simply falling altogether. And as a result, for self-defense, your body tries to have you jolt to protect yourself, either to regain your balance or brace for impact on a fall that isn't happening whatsoever. And I'm not sure about you guys, but I have vividly had multiple hypnic jerk experiences where in my dream, I was doing something that led to the jerk, which I don't know how that's even connected. Like, you know how sometimes you're on Instagram Reels and you see a reel where somebody's playing baseball, but the ball just hits the camera and you literally jump? That was basically going on in my dream leading up to the hypnic jerk. However, I'm curious if your body is anticipating a hypnic jerk and for that reason subconsciously plan something in your dreams. Or do your dreams cause the jerk in some cases? I don't know, but back to our hungover bro. Since you've now involuntarily been subjected to biological shock therapy, you decide that maybe it's time to get up. However, because it's the new year and it's obviously a new you decide to break old habits. And we all know that the best way to break an old habit is by doing it just one more time. And for that reason, you grab your lotion, your tissues, and open up your laptop. And without going into too much detail about what's going on there, we can actually talk about a different type of jerking that's not a hypnic jerk. At least kind of. Have you ever been hanging out with your bros and noticed that some people jerk it with their left hand while others do it? Okay, that's a dumb example. Let's do a different example. Have you ever noticed that some people reach for their phone from their bed with their left hand while some do it from their right hand? This phenomenon is known as handedness, and it's actually quite interesting. Unsurprisingly, a majority of the world is right-handed, but hopefully all of us also know that there is a population of the world that is left-handed. And if you were a true scholar, then you probably also know that there is an even smaller percentage of people that are ambidextrous, meaning that they could interchangeably use either hand as their dominant hand. All of these are interesting and not necessarily uncommon, but did you know that at least 2 of these 3 are a glitch? Let me explain. Now, for starters, the reason why I say 2 out of these 3 is because I don't want to directly call out anybody as being glitched, because realistically that's not the case. But the lore behind how you develop your dominant hand is really quite interesting. But I guess if we're being fair, statistically, 90% of people are right-handed, meaning that, of course, 10% of people on average are left-handed, potentially suggesting that being left-handed could be a glitch. But on the same token, potentially everybody who's not ambidextrous is having a glitch because, I mean, we have 2 arms, why aren't they both dominant? Or at the very least, why doesn't everybody have the same dominant arm? These are great questions, and the answer is, well, interesting. Being either left or right-handed is one of the most obvious ways of showcasing a human brain being wired differently. And before people stretch it too far, this wiring differently doesn't necessarily extend to other things. I'm specifically talking about the wiring for your dominant hand. However, there are people that believe that being left or right-handed may come with other related traits, although this isn't necessarily scientific, and there is no inherent superiority between being left or right-handed. Scientists believe that the reason why some people have a different dominant hand is because of a cocktail of different factors, specifically genetic factors, prenatal brain development, and environmental factors. And it's also believed by scientists that because you can observe a child having either a left or right dominant hand at a very young age, it is believed that your dominant hand is not a learned behavior, and that in some cases your brain even picks your dominant hand before you're ever born, as your brain is still, well, developing. But regardless of which arm you use dominantly to grab your tissues or grab anything else, the reality is that this glitch happens in your brain before you're even born, and truly doesn't mean anything. And I think in the modern day, we all understand this. However, in the past, people were extremely superstitious. And if you lived at basically any point in history prior to the last 100 or so years, you would have been judged extremely harshly because you were left-handed, because people perceived this biological glitch to be something more nefarious. And in Roman culture, for example, people were so superstitious that left-handedness was actually associated with being a bad person. And when Christianity became the dominant religion in Europe, this tradition sort of stuck around for a while and took a long time for the stigma to be, well, erased. And while left-handed people are definitely not glitches, they have more or less experienced a glitch in their mom's belly. And for that reason, they've kind of had a rough go of things. More so in the past, but even in the modern day, there are just so many things that are designed and ergonomically optimized for right-handed people. But fortunately, the business of left-handed products has boomed, and, well, here we are today. After completing your solo session of morning glory, you finally put your feet on the floor and get your booty out of bed, officially starting your new year, hoping that you're done experiencing any more glitches. As you stand up and shuffle around your room, you feel that your room is feeling stuffy, so you walk over to your window, open it up, and take a deep breath of that fresh, crisp January winter air. But instead of experiencing a blissful inhale of crisp air, you instead feel like you have just been stabbed in the lung. Obviously, any shooting or stabbing pain in your chest is an immediate, obvious sign of a medical emergency. However, in this case, it's actually not. Although this pain in your chest is extremely uncomfortable and is definitely scary the first time you experience it, it's not a medical emergency, and it's actually another real-life glitch. Interestingly, at least for me personally, when this first happened to me, even though I felt like something was wrong, I was too scared to tell my mom about it because it happened when I was a kid, and I just hoped it would go away on its own. And it did, and I kind of forgot about it. But every time this would happen every few months or so, I had that same fear, and I never bothered to Google it or tell anybody about it. I just, as a child, accepted my death, assuming I had a ruptured lung and I was just simply waiting to perish. But instead, I got over it and then started playing Minecraft again. If this sounds even remotely familiar to you, let me explain what's actually happening when you're experiencing this very intense but typically short-lived chest pain. According to doctors, at least in young people, the primary cause for this sudden and sharp chest pain is something known as precordial catch syndrome. And similar to hitting your funny bone, the precordial catch syndrome is literally caused, once again, by a pinched nerve. Interestingly, the whole glitch of this chest pain known as precordial catch syndrome has absolutely nothing to do with your lungs or heart at all. At least for me, every time I experienced this pain, I thought my lung was punctured or being ruptured in some way. However, that's not the case at all, and it's only a nerve that's passing through that cavity. This glitch or syndrome is actually typically caused, most commonly, by sitting with poor posture, or directly after changing your seating position, which makes it kind of even more shocking because if you're just sitting down, that's kind of the last time you expect to have a random shooting pain. But when it comes to precordial catch syndrome, it can happen to you at any time. And in your case, simply opening the window and looking out of it and taking a deep inhale was enough to trigger it. And now that deep inhale is extremely painful. But luckily for you, it's at least harmless and will pass in minutes. I don't know about you guys, but when I'm experiencing this lung glitch, even though it has nothing to do with your lung, the last thing I want to do is take a deep breath. And I'll typically just take shallow breaths until it passes. However, some doctors do recommend taking one very deep breath, as that is known to sometimes end the pain immediately. So I guess it's kind of up to you if you want to wait a few minutes till it passes naturally, or if you want to endure the pain and get rid of it instantly. Either way, there's absolutely no risks to your health, which I think is comforting, especially for many of us who have experienced this and just assumed that we had something wrong with us that we just wanted to, well, ignore. And I just wish I could have told 10-year-old bro that. Or even last week's bro, because honestly, I didn't even know about this until right now, researching for this video. But back to you. After you finally let the pain subside, you decide to close your window, leave the bedroom, and enter the kitchen because you want to have a nice breakfast. Although, as soon as both of your feet were planted in the kitchen, well, you've totally forgot what you went in there for. And if this situation sounds familiar to you, then you have also experienced this glitch. And this glitch is actually known as the doorway effect. The doorway effect is a common cognitive glitch where your brain essentially resets or reorganizes its thoughts as you move from one environment to another. It may seem like something small, but walking through a doorway creates enough of a clear boundary within your mind between environments that your brain literally creates this as a transitional shift in context. And because of that, as you go from the old environment to the new environment, your brain sometimes can clear the cache, making you feel clueless once you're in this room, even though you just had what you wanted to do on your mind. This glitch in some cases can be scary because you literally feel like you have early onset dementia, but it's just your brain trying to reduce some of the background noise so it can focus on this new environment, even though you just went from your bedroom to your kitchen. It should go without saying that this glitch is actually harmless, and believe it or not, it's not a sign of low intelligence or a poor working memory whatsoever. This effect is actually a reflection of how your brain organizes experiences into segments based on your environment. And as I mentioned earlier, if your brain is effective at removing cognitive clutter, the thought you had in the old environment, then in some situations, it can misfire, remove too much context, and well, you'll be clueless for a second or two, typically. And while this happens to most of us on a semi-regular basis, there are factors that can actually cause this to happen more often, such as general stress or multitasking. But in any context, it's not dangerous, it's not a negative sign, and it only happens because your brain accidentally got rid of too much stuff to try to focus on this new environment. After noticing a spoon on your dining room table, you realized why you walked in the kitchen in the first place. You obviously wanted to have breakfast. And because this was already a glitch-filled day of a year that was supposed to be glitch-free, you decide to have the breakfast of champions, Cheerios with beer, because your hangover was not going to treat itself. But as you walk over to the pantry and open it, you realize one fatal mistake. The Cheerios that you swore were in the pantry were nowhere to be found. And even though you literally bought them yesterday, no matter where you look, it seems like they have almost vanished. Getting irritated, you call your mom into the kitchen, asking if she saw them or moved them, and without even saying anything to you, it seems like your mom reached into the pantry and pulled the Cheerios out of thin air. And embarrassingly, you realize that the Cheerios were right in front of you the whole time. They just weren't exactly where you expected them them to be. If you've ever been searching for something only to realize that it was literally right in front of you the whole time and you were just somehow ignoring it, then, well, you've also experienced this real-life glitch. Similar to the doorway effect, not being able to see something directly in your plain sight of view has nothing to do with memory failure or anything of the sort. This glitch is once again a mechanism of your brain trying to get rid of low priority or irrelevant information. And sometimes, well, it gets rid of the wrong stuff. One example of this mechanism working properly is the fact that you literally can't notice your nose. Like, your brain intentionally ignores your nose, although you can totally see it. And if you don't believe me, put your finger on the tip of your nose and look down at it. For a few moments afterwards, you will be hyper aware of your nose, at least in most cases. But as we've seen in other cases, you can literally ignore exactly what you're looking for. And once again, stress and multitasking can help amplify this, well, glitch. Another similar but less visual example of not seeing something in plain sight is, well, looking for your phone when it's literally in your hand, or looking for your car keys when they're literally in your ignition. Regardless, after your mom seemingly magically pulled cereal out of thin air, you enjoy a quick bowl of Cheerios and quickly head out of the house because your mom asked you to grab something from the store. As you close the door and begin to walk towards your car, you get in, start the car, and begin driving, only to instantly have the thought, did I lock the front door? And did I turn off the sink after cleaning my bowl? These are two examples of simple questions we likely ask ourselves every day. But believe it or not, they're actually also a mental glitch. I'm gonna keep this one brief as it works on similar mechanisms of the last two, but the reason why so many people are so unsure if they've done basic tasks like locking a door or turning something off is actually the fact that it's a low thought or low attention task. Most of us habitually turn off what we need to turn off and lock what we need to lock. And for that reason, we don't pay much attention to do it. We do it subconsciously. But here's the thing. Our memories are strongly tied to our attention, meaning that if our focus is weak on something, at least consciously, our memories will be weak too. Which is why, more often than not, if we do a task habitually, we will likely have little to no memory of it, creating doubt in our mind, potentially causing us to double check or have anxiety until we come back home to check. However, in most cases, we did do the thing, we just didn't remember. And once again, this is just our brain's attempt to have less cache in the background so we can have more mental bandwidth to focus on what matters. You know, the saber-toothed tiger in front of us, not the locked door in our past. And in some severe cases, this glitch could actually lead you to cause your child at home when you go on a family vacation. But luckily enough, this will actually be the premise of one of the best Christmas movies of all time. After retracing your steps in your mind, you come to the conclusion that you definitely did lock the door, and your anxiety reduces at least a little bit. And because you feel like you've been battling yourself for hours now, you decide to check the time, because you know the drive to the grocery store is 20 minutes, and you have to be at least halfway there. But as you look at the clock on your dashboard, you notice that you've only been driving for 2 minutes. And at this point, it feels, well, impossible. And while the only explanation at this point may seem like a time warp, in reality, you are experiencing, well, you guessed it, another glitch. This glitch being time dilation. And while this phenomenon is something most of us experience on a daily basis, I would argue most of us don't actually know how it works. There's a popular saying that goes, time flies when you're having fun. And honestly, that's kind of scientifically true. But also, the opposite is true. Time goes very slow when you're scared, and you just experienced that on your drive. Because of the anxiety of not remembering if you locked your door, your brain had to process more information per second than it would on average because you were trying to retrace your steps and try to remember exactly if you moved the knob or not. And because even though you were simply just driving down the road, due to the fact that you were so deep in thought thinking about locking the door or not, and the additional information you had to process to do so, your mind was creating denser memories, and for that reason, as you look back on that 2-minute drive you had, it feels like it was longer than it actually was. And that's because your brain indirectly measures time through attention, memory, and sensory input. Now, interestingly, on the contrast, when you are doing repetitive or enjoyable tasks that don't require a ton of thought, your mind is able to relax, and for that reason, time seems like it's simply flying by. But that's because you're not necessarily forming as many memories, and your perception of that time passed is, well, less. And this mechanism is extremely similar to why you forget if that door was even locked in the first place. And once again, this glitch is not a flaw or a sign of anything negative. It's simply a byproduct of your brain trying to be as efficient as possible. And sometimes it doesn't always get it right. And I guess the negative byproduct of this byproduct is that fun times seem to be really short and bad times seem to be really long. But in reality, they're just both your brain's perspective of them. After a long, seemingly endless drive, you arrive at the grocery store, but as soon as you walk through the doors, you notice something horrible brewing. Deep within your diaphragm, you notice a spasm happening, and before you can even process what's going on, you make that terrible sound. You have just got the hiccups out of nowhere. And once again, you have been cursed with another real-life glitch. And as I would bet money that everybody watching this video has experienced hiccups, I doubt most of us understand the true reason why we experience such a seemingly random, well, reflex. Unsurprisingly, hiccups are harmless. I think we all know that by now. But what not everybody knows is the reason why they happen. And hiccups are actually caused by the diaphragm, which is the primary muscle responsible for breathing. What's happening when you hiccup is that your diaphragm is unexpectedly spasming. And with each spasm of the diaphragm is a quick intake of air. Now, this intake of air is short-lived and is actually abruptly cut off by your vocal cords snapping shut, which is what creates that classic hiccup sound. But besides how hiccuping even works, the reason we get hiccups is because of, well, a pretty big handful of factors. Hiccups can be triggered by either eating too quickly, swallowing air, drinking a carbonated beverage, a sudden change in temperature in your environment, emotional stress, or excitement. And the single common denominator amongst most of those triggers is that the nerves involved with breathing, specifically the phrenic and vagus nerves, become irritated, overstimulated, and for that reason, essentially set off the hiccup reflex. And this reflex can go on for minutes, hours, or in some cases, even days, and even more extreme cases, weeks. If nothing else in this video, we've learned that nerves are responsible for a lot of glitches. But it's interesting how much they just glitch and begin working against us. Because while they are harmless, they're definitely annoying, and in some cases embarrassing. And because your hiccups were just so severe in this grocery store, you decide that whatever your mom needed, it could wait until later. So you decide to get back in your car, drive home, and step into the kitchen. Luckily, your hiccups went away on your drive home. However, as soon as you step into the kitchen, you are hit with an overwhelming feeling that what you are doing right now, you've done before. Everything was the same. The clothes you're wearing, the time of day, the location you're standing was all overwhelmingly familiar. And while this feeling hits you in such a strong way, it's not scary, it's just odd. And it's also a glitch commonly known as deja vu. One good example of deja vu for people that watch the channel a lot is me telling you that 75% of you watching this video right now are not subscribed, at least according to YouTube. And also, I love making videos that you guys really enjoy. So if you love this video about real-life glitches and want to see another one, make sure to leave a like or leave a comment below saying part 2 so I know that you guys want another episode in this series. Now, shilling aside, deja vu is likely one of the most common mental glitches we've all experienced, probably on a semi-regular basis. For me, deja vu is pretty rare, but probably happens at least maybe once a year. Although almost every time I experience it, it's equally unsettling, but also rather short-lived. It's almost like a wave that hits you and then just splashes away and fades back into the ocean. Although for me, the lingering feeling after deja vu is definitely eerie. And what else is eerie about this glitch is the fact that there's no definitive reasoning for deja vu, at least as of yet. The leading explanation for deja vu right now is that deja vu happens when the brain processes the same information in two slightly different ways. And if that sounds confusing, well, just imagine information floating through your brain. But instead of information going through two different pathways at the same speed, information in pathway 1 is just slightly faster than information in pathway 2. As information from pathway 1 reaches the final destination faster than 2, by the time that the second information gets there as well, it perceives that second part of information not as complementary to the first, but as a recollection, if that makes sense. It's an interesting theory, but it's also not the only one. Another more simple theory for why deja vu happens is that our brain is literally just glitching out and swapping out the emotions for familiarity with recollection. And based off what we've learned about the brain so far in this video, that seems plausible. But because you've just had an awful day so far, you've been hungover all day, you've been experiencing endless glitches, and your head is pounding, you decide that your best bet now is to go to bed, catch a nap, rest, recover, hopefully sleep everything off, and end this endless streak of glitches, hopefully for this entire year. As you get as snug as a bug in a rug and begin to once again drift off into dreamland, you fortunately avoid the hypnic jerk and successfully fall into sleep. Although it wouldn't be long until you experience the final glitch of the day. As you lay in your bed, you feel a looming presence looking over you, and you so happen to, half asleep, half awake, open your eyes, only to notice the most terrifying shadow figure in the corner of your room. Being absolutely petrified, the only thing you want to do is hide and scream and run. But unfortunately, you can do nothing of the above. Your mouth won't open, your arms won't move, and this creature is only moving closer and closer to you. Your body is absolutely paralyzed, and your mind is only half on your side. And this glitch is likely the most terrifying we've discussed in this entire list. That glitch being sleep paralysis. Sleep paralysis is only typically something that people experience for seconds to minutes tops, but that doesn't make it any less terrifying in the moment. The reason why sleep paralysis happens is because during REM sleep, your brain automatically shuts off your muscles so you don't act out on your dream, which is the reason why we're not all sleepwalkers all the time. But that's another glitch we can talk about in a part 2, sleepwalking. However, sometimes when your brain turns off your muscles, it can also forget to turn itself off, which leads to sleep paralysis. The state where your brain is either half or still fully awake, but your muscles are, well, paralyzed, leaving you in a very awkward and scary situation. Although, fortunately, it's not dangerous, or a sign of any mental illness or demonic possession. Sleep paralysis is more likely to occur if you've experienced sleep deprivation, irregular sleep schedules, high stress, or, interestingly, sleeping on your back. But in every case of sleep paralysis, your body will figure itself out, albeit with a bit of discomfort to your psyche, especially if you're experiencing, well, shadowy hallucinations. Luckily for you, as this shadow demon crawled onto your bed, it noticed your extremely crispy and crunchy bed sheets and decided that you were the real demon here, and it disappeared. And as that fog lifted and your fear was gone, you were able to truly go to bed and end this very glitchful day, hoping that the next day would be better. How to survive the deadliest animal attacks. You and your best bro are sitting on the couch watching TV. It almost seemed like this day could not get any more boring. And just as you were starting to get into the show on the television, it cuts to a commercial break. It was actually a commercial for a brand new experimental zoo that had just opened in your city. And as soon as you and your bro heard zoo and brand new, both of your ears perked up. One of the most interesting things that it was advertising was a safety course on how to survive the most common and deadly animal attacks. Now, since at this point you and your bro had already survived countless deadly locations, as well as numerous deadly survival myths, you figured why not take the opportunity to now also learn about how to survive deadly animal attacks. And without any further convincing required, you and your bro quickly change into your explorer outfits and you head to the zoo. As you and your friend arrive, you notice something peculiar. The parking lot is absolutely empty, and the zoo itself is massive. And it honestly doesn't even look like a zoo. It looks more like a prison, with walls that go endlessly into the horizon. And as you walked into the zoo and met the coordinator, you were informed that the TV ad was a bit misleading, that it actually wasn't a safety course, it was more of a crash course. However, there was a cash prize to be won if the crash course was completed successfully. And since you and your bro were not only bored, but broke, you figured, what did you have to lose? And with that, the coordinator led you to 2 massive steel doors. You and your friend walk in, and the doors slammed behind you. As you and your bro look ahead of you, you realize that this zoo is nothing like any zoo you've ever seen. There was no cages or doors or trails. It was literally just wilderness directly in front of you, besides one table that had one pamphlet on it. And as you pick up this pamphlet, you see that it reads Animal Survival Guide. And as you begin to read it, you hear a voice over a PA system. That voice was the coordinator. And the coordinator tells you if you want to make it out of this challenge alive, you need to follow the rules in this pamphlet to a T. And they also inform you that every animal you encounter is going to be getting bigger in size as you get deeper into the enclosure. At this point, you and your bro know that you have bitten off way more than you could chew, and this was definitely not what you signed up for. But at this point, you had no other option. So you begin to walk into the wooded area. As you and your bro become fully immersed in the woods, you realize that while the circumstances may be a bit peculiar, you're in a rather beautiful location. The leaves are green, the trees are healthy, the grass is green, the flowers are plentiful, and you even notice that there is beehives and bees flying around. And while your bro decides to walk up to the flowers and approach the bees, you open the pamphlet and realize the first animal attack you have to survive is actually bees, the smallest creature in this entire zoo. And as you read through the pamphlet, you see that the first thing it emphasizes is that with bee attacks, prevention is key. Meaning that if you want to survive, or at least in this case, avoid a bee attack, the best way to do so is to be calm, slow, and gentle. And on top of that, avoid bright colors and strong perfumes. The pamphlet then goes on to state that bees typically are non-aggressive to people unless they feel threatened or are stepped on or the privacy of their nest is being encroached on. And while you are now armed with this information, you look up at your friend and are shocked. Your friend, in the bright blue jacket, wearing Axe body spray, is not only actively swatting at bees that are getting too close to him, but he is also trying to get a close look at the beehive. And it's this combination of moves that end up with him being attacked. And almost cartoonishly, you watch him run back and forth with his arms flailing until he runs so far ahead of you that you can't see him anymore. You wait for his screams to stop, you maneuver slowly around the bees, you respect their space, and seemingly magically, you're able to make it to the next area completely unscathed. However, as you meet up with your friend, you can't say the same for him, and his face looks like mine did in high school. Although fortunately, your friend is not allergic to bees. And while he's in pain, you and your friend are able to safely remove the stingers with a credit card, and you continue on your way, satisfied that you had just survived your first animal attack. One that may seem tame, although when you realize that the attacks are only going to get more dangerous from here on out, and the fact that if you did have a bee allergy, that encounter would be deadly, you realize that maybe this isn't so much of a walk in the park. As you and your bro exit the forest and enter a clearing, you notice something peculiar. It's a glass of water on a wooden stool in front of a small pond. At this point, your bro is already over the entire ordeal and just wants to get out and get his prize. And for that reason, he picks up the glass of water, pours it on his head to cool himself off, and begins to trek his way through that pond. But almost instantly, you realize that that wasn't a normal glass of water, and this wasn't a normal pond, because sitting on top of your bro's head was a small and nearly transparent creature known as the box jellyfish. And it was actually a warning of what existed in the pond. Generally, most jellyfish are completely harmless. However, there are a few species that are very harmful, one of those specific species being the box jellyfish. Now, while you could argue that box jellyfish don't necessarily attack you, I would argue that they don't need to, because even just passively brushing against their tentacles could leave you in excruciating pain and potentially in the grave. Box jellyfish are particularly dangerous because they are so hard to see. As you and your bro did, or I guess didn't see in the glass of water, box jellyfish are almost transparent. And typically you feel their tentacles burning your skin before you actually see the jellyfish itself, making encounters with them not uncommon and not pleasant whatsoever. Now, similar to bees, the best way to avoid a jellyfish attack would be avoidance. But since that's literally the case for any animal, I'm gonna stop saying that, although it is true. As you open up the pamphlet to learn about the box jellyfish, you read that the symptoms of coming in contact with a box jellyfish range from either mild skin irritation to severe pain, nausea, and cardiac complications, and the complexity and severity of your symptoms really depend on the amount of venom you become exposed to. Now, armed with this information, you look up from the pamphlet and see that your bro is already halfway through the pond, neck deep in this water. And because of this, you ask him, "Hey, do you feel like you're touching anything in the water?" And he replies, "Yeah, I do actually. It feels like there's invisible marshmallows, but I can't feel anything." That is, until moments later when you hear your friend begin to scream in agonizing pain. You watch him run out of the pond, and standing on the other side, you see him covered from the neck down with long stripes of inflamed skin, areas that got in contact with these jellyfish. And there's still even remnants of jellyfish tentacles sitting on his skin, furthering the exposure and worsening the pain. Knowing that you too have to walk through this pond, you desperately look around for anything that could potentially help you. And it's at that point when you once again consult the pamphlet and read that one of the best ways to avoid stings is to wear a sting suit, or even a traditional wetsuit. And while you don't have access to a wetsuit, you do your very best to insulate the clothes you're wearing. You tuck your pants into your socks, your shirt into your pants, and you put your hands deeply in your pocket. And once you've become as insulated as possible, you try to quickly make your way around the edge of the pond, only going about waist deep in the water and thankfully avoiding a jellyfish attack. Although now that your friend is really looking worse for wear, you once again consult the book about potential remedies for jellyfish attacks. And while your friend is already mentally preparing for a golden shower, you inform him that the book says that fresh water and urine are actually not helpful for jellyfish stings, and they in most cases make it worse. And what you really want to use to neutralize the venom and end the pain is vinegar. Unfortunately, sitting right beside your friend was a large jug of white vinegar. And as you begin to pour it all over your bro, he instantly begins to feel better. And after the vinegar has been used up, you take your handkerchief out of your pocket, you begin to wipe off the tentacles that are still on his body. In this case, your friend was lucky enough to not require medical attention. However, in severe cases of box jellyfish stings, or where a large group of stings happen, it is advised you seek medical attention immediately, as in those cases you may require antivenom to survive. Leaving the pond and heading back to the woods, you and your friend understand that perhaps we should be a bit more careful when approaching these animals, because this obviously is not their first rodeo. And if bees and jellyfish are giving us this much of a hard time, we might not stand a chance against the real predators. Heading back into the woods, you notice once again a small clearing. Although there's no pond, there is simply a stick in the grass. And while at this point you both know better than to grab it, you do slowly approach it to see what it could be. And as you approach it, the stick turns out to be not a stick at all. And it's actually a king cobra, the longest venomous snake in the entire world. It's also a snake that carries a powerful neurotoxin that can seriously mess you up. Instinctually, you and your bro take a few steps back and you instantly consult the pamphlet. And it begins by telling you exactly how deadly and dangerous a king cobra is, and then it tells you what you should do if you encounter it. The first step it recommends is remaining absolutely dead calm. Sudden movements are the perfect way to make the cobra feel threatened and provoke an attack, something you don't want to happen. That means you cannot just run away, and you cannot try to strike it yourself. Since you are already in close proximity to the king cobra and have pissed it off by encroaching on its personal space, it may seem helpful to try to kick it to just, get it out of your way and to scare it off. But realistically, a king cobra can bite much faster than you can kick, and extending your leg towards it is only going to result in a bite that could take your life. And what the pamphlet actually recommends is to do nothing of the sort. Now that you and your bro have already separated yourselves from the snake, it's important to analyze how the snake is feeling. And with the king cobra specifically, if their hood is spread out and their body is off the ground and they are hissing loudly, that means they are peak mad. And your best bet is to create as much space as possible. If this situation was to happen in a real-world scenario, your best bet would be to retrace your steps and leave. But in this case, with you and your bro having to move forward, you have to get creative. And what you and your bro decide to do is to quickly separate and begin moving in opposite directions, almost moving in a circle around the snake. That way, you and your bro could each keep an optimal distance from the king cobra and also mitigate your chances of being bit, because realistically, the cobra can only go after one of you if it decides to strike. And fortunately, even though you and your bro accidentally made this king cobra extremely upset, you were able to pass by it successfully by remaining calm, moving slowly, and keeping your distance. And for that reason, preventing a true attack. Now, if you and your bro weren't so lucky and happened to be bit by the cobra, as the pamphlet states, the best course of action is to still remain calm, but begin taking immediate measures. And what it recommends is immobilizing the limb that was bit and keeping it at or below your heart level. Beyond just that, the pamphlet also recommends removing any tight clothing or jewelry, as your body will begin to swell, and it also recommends against cutting the wound or sucking out venom, as that has not been shown to be an effective preventative measure. Once you've immobilized your limb and removed tight clothing and are trying your best to remain calm, the final thing you must do is seek medical attention, because the neurotoxin in king cobra venom causes paralysis, and if left untreated, can paralyze your lungs, causing you to die. However, fortunately, in this case, your friend did not have a near-death experience, although you're far from out of the woods. As you and your bro stumble into the next clearing, you notice that there's no bees, no jellyfish, no venomous sticks in the grass, but you do see a small, gray, fuzzy thing. It's just sitting there in the grass, and you and your bro can't make out what it is. And at this point, knowing better than just to run up to it, you and your bro decide to yell at it to try to get its attention, because it's obviously something. And after a few shouts, you notice that this ball is moving, and it turns its head to look at you, and what you see is the most adorable puppy you've ever seen. This puppy is all sad and alone and is shaking and crying. Only moments after seeing the innocent face of this puppy, you couldn't help yourself but to go and comfort it. And as you approach this puppy and pick it up, it begins to lick you and love you, and it honestly looks like it's much happier. And for the first time so far in the zoo, you guys are actually enjoying yourselves and feel like you're catching a break. Although your precious puppy time is quickly cut short when you hear a familiar noise in the distance. It's not the bark of a dog, but the howl of a wolf. And you quickly realize that this is a wolf pup, and the pack was about to return sooner rather than later. But before you can even put the puppy down and head on your way, you notice the pack arriving. And judging by the visible ribs on their sides, they had just come back from an unsuccessful hunt. Now, in most cases, wolf attacks are extremely rare, for humans that is. Although, because you are in the wolf's territory, currently engaging with a wolf pup, the pack has no choice but to challenge you and protect their young. As you put the pup down and begin to retrace your steps, the wolves begin to close in on you, and you quickly refer to the pamphlet. And the first thing the pamphlet says is do not run if you encounter wild wolves. Running will only trigger their chase instinct, and will trigger a single wolf or an entire wolf pack to chase you down until the end. Instead, what you should do if you are in a situation where there's a wolf angry at you is to stand tall and make yourself appear as large as possible. And you do exactly that. You take off your backpacks, put them above your head, and begin shouting the most aggressive nonsense you can conjure. And quickly, with your arms in the air and your dominance being asserted, the wolves don't back off, but they do pause in their approach towards you. Consulting the book once again as you are making progress, you read that the next step is to slowly back away while keeping your eyes on the animal and maintaining your confident posture. If you turn your back to the animal or begin to crouch or slouch, this may signal weakness, once again triggering an attack. As you and your bro are standing confidently, you notice the wolf pack begin to no longer circle you and congregate around the pup in front of you, meaning that you're no longer surrounded, but you still have a pack to go through if you want to complete the challenge. And it's because of this that you continue to read the pamphlet, and it informs you that if you are not able to safely back away from wolves, your next best bet is to throw things at it. Sticks, rocks, or even your backpacks are great ways to deter escalation. And in this case, your bro throws his backpack directly at the pack, missing the wolves but startling them enough to begin backing away themselves. As you've learned from the pamphlet, wolves tend to avoid people and do not see humans as prey, and these wolves do not want to attack you. And now that they've been able to gather their pup and congregate, they are much more likely to leave than attack. And that is exactly what's happening after your bro threw his backpack. And as the wolves begin to head on their way, you throw your backpack as well, and you and your bro continue to stand strong until they are completely out of sight. And it's at that point when you collect your bags and continue walking, heading back into the woods and making your way to the next clearing, you and your bro are beginning to feel confident because you're consistently learning and successfully avoiding, or at least surviving, animal attacks. Although little did you and your bro know that the attacks to come would be far beyond just humbling. As you make your way into the next clearing, you notice that this clearing's for once empty. There's no sticks, there's no fuzzball, there's no bees, there's literally nothing. But upon a closer inspection, there is a pile of dirt basically right in front of you. This pile of dirt is covered in flies and honestly smells pretty gross. And while your bro thinks this might be an anthill and that the next animal attack is fire ants, you realize that what you're looking at is not an anthill. It's a pile of animal feces. And you notice beside it are prints that are large and look like paws. And putting two and two together, you realize that these feces came from a predator, and the predator is not far at all. As you crouch down to get a better look at the paw prints in the soil, your bro is quickly attacked by a mountain lion. And now the clock is ticking before your friend becomes dinner for this animal. As your friend is face down in the dirt and the mountain lion is biting into its backpack, you quickly consult the pamphlet. And the pamphlet informs you that mountain lions are stealth hunters, which is why it jumped out of the bushes to attack your friend, although they typically don't attack humans. However, in this case, the mountain lion must have thought your friend was a deer. And mountain lions are rather unique in their attack style, because not many predators try to ambush their prey like mountain lions, making them extra dangerous if you happen to get mistaken for something they're actually looking for. Regardless, time is of the essence, and right now, preventative measures or looking big is simply not an option. It is life or death for your bro, and you quickly begin shouting life-saving advice at him from the pamphlet. The first recommendation is to fight back aggressively and immediately. And instantly, your bro flips over and begins trying to drive a wedge between himself and the mountain lion via his legs. And the next thing you shout now that he is more vulnerable is to protect your head and neck and chest. These are some of the most vulnerable areas on your body that one slash from a mountain lion could easily kill you with. And for that reason, you try to keep your legs near your chest and you cover your face and neck with your forearm and elbows. And now you inform him that when the opportunity arises, strike the sensitive areas of the mountain lion, specifically the eyes and nose. And he begins to bash the nose of the mountain lion with his elbow, and as the mountain lion becomes stunned by its prey fighting back, he quickly mashes his fist on the eye of the mountain lion. As you continue to read, you see that it's crucial to fight back as aggressively as possible and to not play dead, because similar to running, playing dead will only trigger an attack response from these animals. And your best chance of surviving an attack is to resist as much as possible to prove to the animal that you are simply not worth fighting. And in the case of your bro, that is exactly what happens. The mountain lion begins to quickly back away. He gets on his knees and then on his feet, and once again, you two both assume a confident, tall stance, causing the predator to back away into the bushes that it only recently jumped out of. Recouping with your bro, you guys are both, at this point, questioning your decision, but also understanding that there is truly no heading back at this point. You quickly check your friend to make sure he's not bleeding from anywhere vital, and you continue back into the woods. You notice the ground getting marshier, and the trees getting more droopy, and you realize you're heading out of the woods and into the swamp. And while you didn't expect Shrek to be one of the predators on this list, at this point, anything is possible. Although this time, it's different than before. The water is murky. There's vegetation both on the shoreline and in the water. And while you know you need to cross this body of water, you still don't know what lies within it. That is, until two eyes pop out of the water. And while your friend still isn't convinced it's not Shrek, you know exactly what you're looking at. It's an alligator. Alligators are no doubt terrifying, but they're also so interesting because they are literally like living dinosaurs. But on this particular day, you don't feel like getting up close and personal with a relic from the dinosaur era. As you consult the pamphlet, the first thing you see is that it's recommended that if you encounter an alligator to maintain a safe distance. And it's recommended to have at least a 20 or 30 foot gap between yourself and the alligator. And while you know you're already much closer than that and have to get closer in order to pass it, you continue reading to see if there's any additional information to survive the unlikely but possible attack. One thing you know in the pamphlet is that alligator attacks on humans are rare. Although in your case, you're getting attacked by every animal, so that doesn't mean much to you. And in the cases of alligator versus human brawls, alligators typically attack because they either felt threatened or had their nest encroached upon, or they even potentially mistook a person for prey. And while you understand that you could basically fall into any of those categories, you don't feel super confident about crossing this body of water. Your bro, with the worst luck in the world and apparently a death wish, interrupts your reading and tells you an alligator can't bite what it can't catch. And he sprints into the body of water, hoping to get through as quickly as possible. Although, unfortunately for him, he literally ran directly into the jaws of the alligator. And now, you're once again yelling life-saving advice to him. One of the first things you read, once again, is that if you get into a situation with an alligator, it's best to fight back immediately. Not by trying to pry its jaws open, because you have no chance at doing that, but by, once again, targeting sensitive areas. Alligator's primary method of attack is using a powerful bite to subdue prey. So if you can strike its eyes or nose to try to have it loosen its grip, you can ideally get out of its jaws and run fast away. And that's exactly what your bro does. He begins plunging his thumbs into the eyes of the alligator, causing the alligator to open its mouth only slightly, allowing your bro to roll out of the mouth of the alligator, swim across the body of water, and run like hell away from it. And as you read the pamphlet, you see that running away from alligators is highly recommended. And it's even stated that while alligators are fast in short bursts on land, they cannot outrun humans over longer distances. Meaning that there's no need to run in a zigzag pattern, and you can run as fast as you can, as far as you can, away in a straight line. Now, as you continue to read, you see that even if you survive an alligator attack, you're not in the clear just yet. Because if one of the teeth penetrates your skin, the bacteria in the alligator's mouth could cause a nasty infection. Although fortunately for your bro, the bites didn't penetrate through the backpack or the jacket he was wearing, meaning that he was bruised up, but alive. And after your bro's scuffle with the alligator, the scaly guy decided to kick rocks and swim down the stream, leaving the body of water safe for you to cross, allowing you to once again reunite with your unlucky buddy. As you both begin to catch your breath before you head into the next section of the arena, you hear a buzzing over the PA, and then you hear the voice of the coordinator. And the coordinator says that you and your bro are doing well, and that there are only 2 challenges left before you get the large prize. That is, if you survive. But that isn't the only thing the coordinator says. The coordinator also says to you directly watching at home, if you are enjoying this video about how to survive different animal attacks and want to see a part 2, leave a like or leave a comment on the video saying part 2. And if you want to see Trust Me Bro hit 2 million subscribers, make sure to subscribe if you're not already. And with that amazing message from the coordinator out of the way, let's get to the final challenges in this rather experimental house of horrors that is this zoo. As you make your way into one of the final clearings, you see the unmistakable sight of a tiger right in front of you. Although this tiger doesn't look quite right. This tiger looks skinny, frail, and gray in the face. You can tell this tiger is elderly, and you're almost curious if the zoo ran out of budget for its predators. But as you consult the pamphlet, before you even get anywhere near the tiger, you understand why there is an old tiger specifically in this zoo. As you read, you are informed that tigers typically hunt alone and usually target medium to large sized prey, such as wild boar, deer, and other animals. And human attacks for tigers aren't as uncommon as other animals we've discussed. And the most common instances where tigers attack humans are when a tiger is old, injured, or feels threatened. And these sorts of attacks are even more common in areas where both humans and tigers live in close proximity, such as rural villages and areas like that. Now, knowing why there is an elderly tiger in front of you, you take pity on your bro, hand him the pamphlet, and tell him that you're gonna take one for the team, and all you ask him to do is read you the survival tactics. Fortunately, you remember exactly how to survive a mountain lion attack. And assuming a tiger is similar, you plan on using the same moves, and to save time, you don't only approach the tiger, you also begin to just lay on the ground in a defensive position, almost to call it on to you. And as the tiger begins to approach you and then poke you with its nose, you begin waiting for your friend to give you the next steps. But as you glance over at your friend as you are covering your head, you see that he is standing there cluelessly, picking his nose, and you realize you're left to your own devices. Without having any professional advice, you decide to go with old reliable. And as this tiger begins to mount you and open up its mouth to show off its massive teeth, you kick Terry the tiger right in the tiger testicles and make this elderly tiger scream in pain and run away crying like a little kitten. Obviously, that's no real survival strategy, but in a pinch, it just happened to work. And as you backtrack to your friend, you rip the pamphlet out of his hand, smack him over the head with it, and continue onto the final portion of this crazy zoo's survival challenge. Heading out of the woods, once and for all, you're met with the beach and the biggest body of water you've encountered so far. At this point, you're curious how all of this has even fit in this zoo, but you're honestly too over it to even ask. Luckily, this body of water is not something you have to swim through, because there is an albeit rickety bridge going directly across it. And while it's so long you can't see the other end of it, due to the fog that is over the water, you and your bro assume that this bridge is actually what's going to take you out, because there's no animals that live on bridges. And it's for this reason that you and your bro are sprinting down this bridge to just be done with the zoo, grateful that you're actually alive. However, as you're sprinting on this bridge through the fog clears and you notice a massive gap in the bridge directly in front of you. But unfortunately, it's too late to stop, and you and your bro are both dropped into the water. Luckily, it's only a short gap between the end of the bridge and the beginning of the second part of it. But during your time in this water, you understand why this bridge is here, and you have just met the final predator in this video. Because your friend is so bruised and banged up, you quickly notice that the blood from his clothes are seeping into the water. And this blood in the water is attracting nearby sharks. And before you know it, you have two great white sharks circling you and your bro. Now, like most people know at this point, great white sharks are not trying to hunt humans particularly, although they are curious and will give a test bite to unfamiliar things, and will give more than a test bite to things they deem to be prey. And while these sharks don't see you and your bro as food, they don't know what to make of you and decide to learn a bit more. And as one of the sharks begins to approach your bro, you quickly begin reading on what he should do. As the shark approaches your friend and he gets more and more terrified, you tell him, hey, the pamphlet says to stay calm, maintain eye contact, and avoid splashing. You cannot outswim a great white shark, and it's not even worth trying. What you should do instead is keep yourself vertical and slowly back away. And while your friend seems receptive to this information, panic got the best of him. And as the shark swam by his leg, he kicked the shark in the nose, instantly angering it, causing the great white to circle back around in preparation for a bite. Seeing what's inevitably going to happen, you continue to read and see that the book states that if you are bitten, you need to defend yourself immediately, aiming specifically for the eyes, gills, or snout, ideally with any object you have, or in the worst case, your fists. Even a small bite from a great white shark can be deadly, meaning that you have absolutely no margin for error. Feeling unconfident that your friend's going to be able to protect himself in this situation, you decide to do something rash. As the shark swims past you, while being focused on your friend, you decide to throw your backpack at the shark, giving it something to focus on. And as the shark bites on your backpack, you dive your fist deep into its gills, hoping to prove that you and your friend are not worth messing with. And fortunately, it works, and the two sharks swim away. But now you have no backpack. But a backpack is a small price to pay for your life. You and your bro quickly swim to the other side of the bridge and continue to walk until the bridge leads to the shore, and on the shore you see a building and a wall, similar to the wall that you approached on your way in, and two metal doors once again. You approach these doors and they instantly open for you, and you are met with a bright, shining light. This is what you've been waiting for. This is the room with the prize. This is everything you've wanted. And as you walk through the metal doors and walk into this very, very overwhelmingly bright room, you are met with the zoo's gift shop. And the coordinator you met previously hands both you and your bro 2 t-shirt vouchers to get a free t-shirt that says, "I went to the worst zoo ever and all I got was this t-shirt." Not wanting to go home empty-handed, you and your bro collect your shirts and head home, vowing to never visit sketchy zoos ever again. Cities are a lot like people. They have an aura, a vibe, and most importantly, a history. Just like people, typically the more famous a city is, the more crazy its history is. And that's exactly what we're going to discuss. In this video, we're going to look at famous cities with scary and honestly crazy histories. Each history is going to be getting progressively darker, and for the sake of this video, we're only going to be focusing on one specific element from each city's history. Got it? Let's begin. Starting our journey with one of the most famous cities on this list, we have Paris, France. Now, if you already know what I'm going to talk about, here's a cookie. But if you don't, listen up. This part of France's history isn't extremely dark, it's just creepy. And if you don't know what I'm talking about yet, I am talking about the Paris catacombs. Paris has had a long, vast history with many ups and downs, so I chose something rather interesting and tame to start off the list. In case you're unfamiliar, the Paris catacombs are an extensive underground tunnel system below Paris. It extends about 250 kilometers long and it contains the bones of over 6 million people. The Paris catacombs exist because at the time, France's graveyards were overflowing and in some places leaching into the water system. Definitely not what you want to be drinking. The lack of space was becoming unsanitary, and on top of that, Louis XVI was trying to expand Paris and more land was needed. The solution? Well, why don't they fill up the quarries that are already under the city with the bones? And that's exactly what they did. And they began digging up graves and respectfully transporting them at night under black veil carriages from the graveyard into the catacombs. The bones were then structured and displayed in an artistic way, and then shortly later opened to the public. Yeah. Although there isn't a specific horrific cause for all of these 6 million dead people, for the most part, it is still just creepy to think about the huge mass grave that lies below one of the most famous and beloved cities in the world. I really wanted to add this example, one, because it was tame and it was a great start to the video, which, I mean, keep in mind this video gets gruesome pretty quickly, but also just because of the fact that you don't typically think about this when you think about a Paris trip. You think about eating a croissant, seeing the Eiffel Tower, visiting the 6 million bones below the city. Like, that typically isn't on the to-do list. Maybe it is for some, but it never was for me. So I thought I'd mention it because I feel like that is really unique to Paris. Moving on. Next up, and already exponentially higher on the darkness meter, we have Salem, Massachusetts, which is also the only entry on this list that is famous for its dark history. And unless you've been living underground with 6 million bones, then you would know that what I'm talking about is the Salem witch trials. The Salem witch trials were a series of hearings and prosecutions of people accused of witchcraft in colonial Massachusetts between February 1692 and May 1693. Only a short amount of time. But the amount of hysteria that took place within this amount of time is shocking. Witch trials and witch accusations have been a long-lasting occurrence across Europe for long before Salem even existed. By the time that the Salem witch trials happened, it was basically faded out across most of Europe and only existed on America and the fringes of Europe. The entire situation began when 2 young girls began acting peculiar. They began screaming, throwing things, uttering strange sounds, and contorting themselves. A local doctor visited them and was unable to explain their symptoms in a medical sense, and his only logical explanation was witchcraft. The afflicted girls accused 3 women of bewitching them. These accusations are believed to stem from social prejudice. The accusations spread quickly and fueled the existence of local rivalries, fear, and belief in the supernatural. This truly had an exponential effect because the more accusations there was, the more people began to believe in the supernatural. The local authorities shortly stepped in and a specialty court was even created to deal with these matters specifically. With those courts came the trials, and with those trials came prosecutions and executions. More than 200 people were accused, 30 people were found guilty, and 19 people were executed by hanging. The Salem witch trials are definitely a dark part in Massachusetts and America's history as a whole. And for me personally, the most interesting part about the story is just how quickly everything came and went, and how easily people were to believe almost nonsense with no evidence. It's rather strange and a very cautionary tale. And since we're already talking about witch trials, why don't we just talk about the heart of the witch trial? Edinburgh, Scotland. If you thought 19 executions was bad in Salem, Edinburgh had 1,500 executions by torturous means. not just hanging. Now, I'm not just going to dedicate a whole nother city's dark past to witch trials. I don't want to have witch trials be the same dark past for two different cities. So I'm going to focus on other attributes that contribute to the dark past of Edinburgh. Attributes such as the old town being less than 1 square mile, but housing over 60,000 people. This tiny cramped situation caused very poor living situations. And the reason they chose to live like this is because they were protected within the town's walls from the English.
Hello, governor.
Because of this, a lot of the lower end of society chose to live in tunnels. These were abandoned tunnels that were originally built for business storage that were abandoned because they were too damp. People literally lived and died in these tunnels, and yes, the hygiene was horrible. Also, Edinburgh was the body-snatching capital of the 19th century. People were digging up dead bodies to steal the belongings off the cadaver and then donating the bodies to the medical schools for a large wage. It was a pretty lucrative side hustle, and I can only imagine if Instagram hustle culture was alive back then. Okay, I literally made a skit for this, but it was so bad, I just removed it. Like, I obviously have never heard a Scottish accent because it was just bad. If this video gets 20,000 likes, I will link it unlisted in the description. That's the only way you'd be seeing it because it was just so bad. Last two things I'll mention about Edinburgh's dark past is their public executions, specifically hangings, and also fecal matter being thrown out of the windows, but that was just pretty commonplace for medieval Europe, so let's just keep going. Now, before we leave the beautiful continent of Europe, we have one more European city to talk about. That is Prague, Czech Republic. The city in modern times is lively and beautiful and cultural, but in the 1600s and 1700s, the best way to describe the city was honestly just an unfortunate series of events. The first element of this series of events is the defenestrations of Prague, which is funny enough because the defenestrations are their own series of events. Basically, what defenestration or to be defenestrated means is to be thrown out a window, literally, and this happened multiple times in Prague. In 1419, in 1483, and in 1618, multiple members of parliament were thrown out of the window by disgruntled members of the public.
No, please.
Each of these defenestrations had rippling effects through society at the time, but I want to focus on specifically the defenestrations of 1618 because I believe they had the biggest effect on the city of Prague. Almost immediately following the defenestrations in Prague, being thrown out the third-story window, this led to the conflict that is known as the 30-Year War. And before you guys ask me how long this war lasted, I honestly don't know. I couldn't find the research. But only 3 years into the war, in 1621, 27 Czech leaders were executed in the town square, and several others were exiled. The war led to the Battle of Prague, further devastating the city and reduced its population from 60,000 people down to 20,000 people. That's a 60% drop in only a few years' time. And if you think that's bad, only a few years after that, in 1689, a huge fire destroyed most of the city. And then after that, finally in 1713 and in 14, one of the last major outbreaks of the plague afflicted the city, killing more than 12,000 people. It's safe to say that if you were alive for that century of Prague's history, you were not having fun. If for whatever reason your darkness meter isn't quite satisfied yet, it's about to be. The next three on this list are vile. With that being said, we're moving our show over to the Middle East, specifically Baghdad, Iraq. Although extremely recently, Iraq has had a plethora of issues from their struggles against ISIS to last decade's war with the Americans. And even before that, their encounters with the British.
Hello, governor.
That's not what I want to talk about. What I want to focus on specifically in Baghdad's past is the siege of Baghdad in 1258. This specific siege was a pivotal and devastating event during the Mongol invasion of the Islamic world. This siege was led by Genghis Khan's grandson. At the time, Baghdad was considered one of the most prosperous cities in the world and was known for its cultural and scientific achievements. Although after a relatively short siege, the city fell to the Mongols. The Mongols sacked the city, destroying its libraries and its House of Wisdom and all of its infrastructure. The caliph was captured and later killed, and this was honestly a symbolic end to the Islamic Golden Age. The death toll of this siege and the sacking of the city was estimated to be in the hundreds of thousands, making it one of the most catastrophic events in the history of the Middle East. The fall of Baghdad significantly weakened the Muslim world, leading to political fragmentation and making it more vulnerable to future conquests. This event has had a lasting impact on the region and is often cited as a turning point in Middle Eastern history. The darkest part about this, in my opinion, is definitely the long-term lasting effects of this siege. The death and torment of the hundreds of thousands of people on its own is horrible and cannot be forgotten or neglected. But the fact that this siege had such a long-lasting impact on Iraq as a country in the Middle East as a region is insane and, in my opinion, extremely dark. Moving even further east, we find ourselves in China, specifically Nanjing. And unfortunately, Nanjing has a very dark past. Over the course of 100 years, Nanjing found itself victim to multiple wars and unfathomable bloodshed, with a death toll in the tens of millions. This extremely dark time began with the Taiping Rebellion, a massive civil war in China from 1850 to 1884, where estimates of the death toll range from 20 to 70 million. After the Taiping Rebellion, there was multiple sieges and conflicts during that time, but the most notable post-Taiping Rebellion was the Nanjing Massacre, which was a mass murder and assault of civilians. When I say assault, I mean something much more dark and sinister, which I'm not really able to say, but use your imagination. The Nanjing Massacre, or the assault of Nanjing, was the mass murder of the Chinese civilians that happened immediately after the Battle of Nanking in the Second Sino-Japanese War. This massacre began on December 13th, 1937, and the massacre lasted 6 weeks long. The perpetrators, the Japanese Imperial Army, committed such vile war crimes such as mass assault, looting, and arson. The massacre is considered to be one of the worst wartime atrocities of all time. The Japanese army had quickly pushed through China after capturing Shanghai in November 1937, but in early December, it was on the outskirts of Nanjing. The speed of the army's advance was likely due to the commanders allowing looting and the assault on the way. Unfortunately, by the time the Japanese military reached Nanjing, the Chinese military was not in a place of defense. Once the Japanese troops reached the city, they faced minimal resistance and ran entirely unchecked. Chinese soldiers were rounded up and executed, and that's where the lawlessness truly began. Due to this unchecked power and other factors, the death toll is estimated to vary from 40 to 300,000, and there is estimated to be anywhere from 20,000 to 80,000 assaults. The International Military Tribunal for the Far East and its findings estimate that 200,000 murders and 20,000 cases of assault took place. For obvious reasons, I won't be getting into further detail, but this specific century was a horrible time for China, and this specific massacre was hell on earth for any resident of Nanjing. Our final entry on the list brings us back to Europe, specifically Russia. Where? St. Petersburg, or as it was formerly known as, Leningrad. If you're familiar with World War II, you know it's coming. If you don't, buckle up. The Battle of Leningrad, or the Siege of Leningrad, was a prolonged military blockade undertaken by the Axis powers against the Soviet Union. Germany's army advanced from the south, while Germany's allies, the Finnish army, invaded from the north. Both groups created a ring around the city, cutting off all supplies. This barricade lasted for 872 days and became the longest and most destructive sieges in all of history. An estimated 1.5 million people died as a result of this siege, and at the time, it was not classified as a war crime, although in the 21st century, some historians have classified it as a genocide due to the intentional destruction of the city and the systematic starvation of the civilian population. Germany wanted Leningrad specifically because of its cultural significance to the Soviet Union, and they were willing to do anything to get it. They motivated the Finnish army to join in on the battle by offering them part of the land once the siege was complete. Although they had every intention of taking the land, they didn't want to destroy it, and for a few reasons they didn't invade in the same manner as they did elsewhere via the Blitzkrieg. It's hard to truly get into the details of this story without getting too in the weeds about World War II history, but let's just boil it down to this. For over 2 years and 4 months, a city was surrounded by enemy forces with consistent fighting and no supplies in or out. The civilians were starved to death and frail, and over the course of this almost 2.5 years, 1.5 million people died. Today, the city is beautiful, vibrant, and cultural, but not long ago, millions of people were dying by starvation and war in one city, in one battle. If that's not dark, I don't know what is. This video really serves as a small spotlight on a small amount of some of the torment that has happened across the world, across history. It really makes you appreciate the relatively peaceful times we're living in now. But let me know what you guys think. How many of these cities' histories were you aware of? And what cities' histories do you know about that I didn't discuss? If you guys enjoyed this video, I'll be more than glad to do another one. For now, that's all. Okay, this is bad. Oi, mate, why would you work a 9 to 5 if you could just go dig up a body and sell it to the school? You gotta start thinking like a Sigma.